when the precious bond between parent and child breaks. The adult doesn't always come out on top. A gifted student's own drama has a killer plot.
Shakespeare brings out this confession, the power of Shakespeare.
A jazz baby won't let anyone stop the music.
They called that culture jazz mania. They went insane.
And a damaged daughter takes lethal revenge.
That kind of abuse is a recipe for disaster.
When these deadly women fall out with mom and dad, it will be at their parents' peril. Fort Worth, Texas, 1992. 16-year-old Dorothy Marie Robards is an A student who has the looks as well as the grades.
Marie was just this kind of girl that teenage boys always look twice at. Beautiful, long legs, gorgeous brown eyes.
And every parent's dream.
She was delightful. She didn't talk back. She didn't argue. She just went with the flow.
Marie shares a tight bond with her mom.
She was very attached to her mother. I don't think you'd say unnaturally so, but more of a sisterly sort of attitude towards her mother.
They finished each other's sentences. They would chat through the night.
You would have been fine. You would have, you would have looked the nicest. Yeah. Hi, darling.
But there's one thing wrong with family life for Marie. Her stepdad, Frank.
Did you clean your room like I asked?
Marie didn't like Frank initially for just taking away her mother,
You aren't my dad.
diverting attention from her to Frank.
He's a good man. Oh, I can't stand living in this house.
When her mother said, I'm gonna stick with Frank and we're gonna make this marriage work, the devastation was enormous for Marie.
If you don't divorce him, I'll have to leave.
Marie ups the ante
You can go to your grandparents' house then.
and loses.
Frank. Oh!
She decides to leave the family home.
In Marie's anger, she impulsively left home. But then, as most teenagers do, she changed her mind and wanted to come back.
Her rebellion only lasts 1 week. But when she returns, there's no happy homecoming. Her mom and stepdad believe she's better off living with her natural father.
She had been basically, she felt, kicked out of her own home, away from her mother, due to this stepfather who she didn't like.
Marie's misfortune is a blessing for her real dad, Stephen.
He was excited that he was going to have the chance to be a full-time father.
Stephen's girlfriend at the time, Sandy Hudgens, remembers how he put his all into making Marie welcome.
He filled those shoes, I think, better than I expected.
How's your meal?
I don't really like beans.
He got a job at the post office. He began to take care of Marie more, buy her clothes.
But a father's love can only go so far, particularly when he lives in a bachelor pad.
Dad, where am I gonna sleep?
Oh, right here.
Even though she knew how hard he was trying to please her, it was a miserable life.
She was sleeping on the floor. She didn't even have her own room.
I told Steve that, you know, a girl her age really, really needed her privacy and how important that was.
Her dad was trying to get that for her, but Marie wasn't willing to wait.
I hate it here. I have to sleep on some roll-up bed.
Marie is desperate for her mom.
I miss you.
One-sided phone calls I overheard
Please, Mom.
was her constantly begging,
Please,
and
begging you.
her mother kept saying no, making her cry, hanging up on her.
Marie was dependent on her mother and would do anything to be with her.
I just miss her so much.
It just was more dependency than the normal teenager.
Your dad's here for you.
Sandy offers comfort, but is no substitute for the real thing.
I couldn't fill all of the needs she was missing right then.
The one place where things go right is school.
Even though her life was not what she wanted, and though she felt stuck, she still excelled in high school. And so she was an A student, and she was especially an A student in her chemistry class.
Now please be careful. Barium is poisonous.
The star student is working on an extra special assignment, an experiment in death. Fort Worth, Texas. Beautiful, gifted, charming. 16-year-old Marie Robards is a girl with substance. But this star student lacks one thing she wants desperately:
I'm gonna go now.
her mother's company.
Please, I'm begging you, please.
She needed her mother.
Bye.
She wasn't going to adjust to living without her. She would do anything to get back with her mother.
Marie is hatching a plan to get home.
One day, without anybody noticing, she took a little barium acetate when she was over by the chemicals, poured it into a napkin, closed up the napkin, and headed home.
The A-plus science student will conduct an experiment with the common school laboratory chemical barium acetate, a poison lethal to humans. Marie waits a week until the night of February 18th, 1993, when she convinces her dad to have fast food for dinner.
I'm gonna grab a beer. Do you want anything?
Water.
Sure.
Her father, who wasn't much of a cook, goes out and gets Mexican food, and when he comes back, she sprinkles a little bit on one of his tacos or enchiladas.
He did tell me it was too salty, but he ate it anyway. Steve was going to go to church. I talked to him earlier.
Stephen won't make the service because he's closer to God than he imagines.
Within an hour, he comes back saying he felt sick to his stomach, and then he went downhill in a hurry.
I think I get Sandy.
His girlfriend, Sandy, who lives down the hall, gets a knock on the door.
So I went on down there, and he was already in bed, really having a lot of stomach pain, a lot of cramping. He said, "I think I've got food poisoning."
Marie's chemical concoction is taking hold.
Something is seriously wrong now.
Can you tell me what happened here?
I don't know.
Dorothy Marie Robards watched him as the EMTs tried to revive him and never once opened her mouth to save her father's life.
Paramedics begin a desperate race to save him.
Can you go outside and wait?
Despite their best efforts, Stephen dies.
I really couldn't believe it. He was 38 and in good health.
Authorities investigate the death, but rule it a heart attack.
And just like that, Marie had committed the perfect murder.
Marie gets her wish. She is home and back in her mother's arms. But Marie's not the only one with a shocking secret.
The mother says, listen, the two of us are leaving. We're going to Florida. And Marie says, how long have you known about this? She said, for several weeks. I just didn't want to tell you until it's time to go, and it's time to go. Marie realized that if her mother had just told her earlier, then this whole poisoning of her father would never have taken place.
Ended up being all for naught. That makes it even a bigger tragedy.
Marie buries her poisonous past in college classes. But 11 months later, the guilt becomes too much to bear.
It's the speech from Claudius. Claudius, who murders Hamlet's father. And it's the famous speech about guilt. Will he ever be able to get over the knowledge that he murdered Hamlet's father? She sees Marie breaking down in tears and says, oh my gosh, what's happened? You wrecked your grandparents' car. Marie says, no. Well, you didn't murder someone, did you? Marie says,
My father. I poisoned him.
Don't be stupid.
and out comes the story. After all this time, Shakespeare brings out this confession, the power of Shakespeare.
He was great.
If Marie hadn't confessed to a classmate that she had killed her father, she would have gotten away with this murder forever.
I just really wanted to move him back with my mom.
For Marie's best friend, it's a drama too big to keep secret. She goes to the authorities.
When they redid the autopsy, they found the barium levels in Stephen Robards' blood and tissue to be 28 times the lethal amount.
Marie is arrested and quickly confesses, but insists she never meant to kill her dad. She just wanted him sick so she could go back to her mom. But the jury doesn't buy it and convicts her of first-degree murder.
Given the fact that Marie stole the barium a week in advance and held on to it, certainly shows a great amount of preparation and planning.
Marie was a smart girl. She was getting A's in chemistry. She knew exactly how much barium acetate it would take to kill her father.
On May 10th, 1996, Marie Robards is sentenced to 28 years in prison. The flawless pupil becomes a model prisoner. After just 7 years, she gets parole. Sandy is still coming to terms with the tragedy.
I hate to admit it, but I had a really bad depression for years. Thank goodness that finally went away. But I haven't loved anyone since Stephen. Haven't gotten close enough to anyone.
Few believe Marie was born bad. But the combination of desperation and immaturity creates a murderer.
For Marie, watching her father die a horrible, agonizing death was something she had to do to get what she wanted. Everyone that knew Marie said she was a good girl. I think she was, right up to the moment she murdered her father.
For teens, breaking the rules
What Dorothy wanted, Dorothy was going to get.
The best night of my life.
can be exciting,
She was pretty much running wild.
dangerous, even deadly.
The press blamed this murder on jazz mania.
San Francisco, 1925. A new beat is swinging the nation. The provocative and some believe sinful sound of jazz. All the rage in the illegal speakeasies of America under Prohibition.
San Francisco has always been a very fun city. In the roaring 20s, it was wild.
The jazz lures in 16-year-old Dorothy Ellingson.
Dorothy was precocious, and she looked much older than she was. When she was 14, she looked probably 17. When she was 16, she looked 19.
Dorothy's grown-up looks are her passport to pleasure.
Dorothy started drinking alcohol at the age of 12. It's not surprising that she was drawn into the world of nightclubs and jazz and drinking.
It's not only bootleg alcohol that Dorothy thirsts for.
She liked men. She liked all kinds of men.
Dorothy's philosophy seemed to be, let's dance, let's drink, and let's do some other things.
In those days, even the roaring 20s, it was still very, very unacceptable for an unmarried woman, let alone a 16-year-old girl, to be having sex. But for her, acting out sexually obviously made her feel good, made her feel powerful.
She was not concerned what other people thought or cared for what they expected of her. It was what she expected of herself, and that was to entertain herself and have a good time.
Prohibition officers have their eye on her, but Dorothy thinks she's one step ahead.
I'm Montaigne De Niro and I'm 19.
Dorothy was creating a fantasy for herself. Had a false ID that listed her as Montaigne De Niro, and she was age 19, and that's the role she played.
Dorothy's fake ID meant freedom. It meant adulthood. It meant excitement. But she was way too young to have it.
She was charged with truancy. She was charged with running away. She ran to Los Angeles at one point to be with a musician down there.
Several stints in juvenile detention don't stop Dorothy's behavior.
It didn't seem to bother her very much, but it really bothered her parents. They looked at it as a real shame to the family.
Her parents are at their wits' end. They want Dorothy on the straight and narrow.
Where have you been?
She was from a very kind of law-abiding, respectable family.
What will people say?
I don't care what people say.
Anna was a very staid mother type. In this case, it was obvious Dorothy was having sex with men. It was obvious that she was having sex with many men. This was upsetting her mother terribly. She didn't really know what to do about it, so the best she could do was confront her daughter.
You will behave, young woman.
But Dorothy refuses to toe the line.
Dorothy and her mother had a tempestuous relationship, and it got worse as Dorothy got older.
I think any mother of a teenage girl would have been upset that her 16-year-old daughter was hanging out in nightclubs and seeing older men.
Dorothy won't repent. Instead, She records every sordid encounter.
Dorothy kept a diary. It was a little red notebook where she put information about her comings and goings.
Went to Joe's party, met an amazing musician. He knows how to use all his instruments.
It was kind of a way to look into her mind. She talked about the men she went out with, what she wanted to do. It was pretty much focused on partying.
Dorothy's diary is filling up nicely.
She judged them according to their physical build and how they measured up to her standards.
But there's always room for fresh material.
Dorothy was so rebellious. She liked to be bad. She liked to be a bad girl.
Stop, Dorothy. You're not going out.
When Dorothy insists she is going to another jazz party, Mom Anna puts her foot down.
There was constant turmoil in the family. The fights between Dorothy and her mother got physical, where they would literally fight with each other over it.
I'm 16. I can do what I like. Go to bed.
Dorothy was furious. She's being threatened two ways: not being able to do what she wanted to do, which was go to the dance, and also the possibility of being arrested.
Anna wins for now. But Dorothy has a party trick no one will forget. San Francisco, 1925. 16-year-old Dorothy Ellingson is a jazz baby with a taste for trouble. She's broken curfew, the law, and her parents' spirits. But her plans to paint the town red hit a roadblock.
They went to bed angry, and they woke up angry.
You are absolutely not going out. I want you to get a job.
On January 13th, the fighting stops.
And start being a responsible
Already a petty juvenile offender, Dorothy is about to become a really bad girl.
I'm sick of all this fighting. So am I.
She put 2 bullets in the back of her head without giving it a second thought.
Dorothy shot her mother in the back of the head because she didn't want to look her in the eyes as she was killing her.
She won the argument.
Dorothy simply got upset that her mother was tightening the reins on her behavior, and she shot her.
Anna's life is over. For Dorothy, the party's just starting.
She went dancing. She was the life of the party.
You're sure having a wow of a time. It's the best night of my life.
She wanted to have her good time. She did have her good time. She danced for 12 hours straight. It's very strange behavior, but she wasn't concerned about the future. She wasn't even concerned about the past. She was concerned about the now.
But after the high comes the hangover.
Dorothy's brother found the body later that day.
It was kind of assumed that Dorothy was involved.
Dorothy, you'd better come with us.
Dorothy's arrest, just days after the murder, shocks the community. They can't believe a 16-year-old girl is capable of killing her own mom.
What Dorothy did, killing her mother, was at that time completely unheard of.
That was San Francisco's first case ever of matricide, of someone killing their mother.
Even though Dorothy confesses, some authorities doubt her guilt.
The coroner actually disputed Dorothy's confession. He said that there was no way that a girl of 16 could ever kill her mother. That was just impossible.
But if Dorothy's not responsible, who is? The newspapers of the day believe they know. They lay the blame on the mesmerizing effect of jazz.
The newspapers ate it up. They called that culture jazz mania. People got their blood worked up. They got excited. They lost their inhibitions. And they felt that it affected their psyche, that they actually they went insane.
Even though the press puts jazz on trial, a jury isn't convinced.
Dorothy killed her mother, and it had nothing to do with jazz.
The jury feels it's time Dorothy grows up. In August 1925, she's found guilty of manslaughter and given 10 years in San Quentin prison. With her wings finally clipped, Dorothy renounces her wild and deadly ways.
She always said she never should have done it, and she wished she could go back and relive her life and do it the way that her mother had asked her to.
She hoped that her example could prevent other kids from going the same way that she did. She advised kids to obey their parents, to learn a trade, not riding in fast automobiles with people.
Whether Dorothy really did a complete turnaround in prison, only Dorothy knows. She said the right things. She said things people wanted to hear. Did she mean it? I have my doubts.
After 7 years in jail, Dorothy is released and reunites with her father.
The relationship between Dorothy and her father, Joseph, was very strained. He was trying to be a father to her, but she finally realized that she couldn't live in that household. It was causing too much strain there.
Dorothy changes her name and tries to leave her notoriety behind her.
She spent the rest of her life trying to run from who she had been, but she was never quite able to.
In 1962, Dorothy's dancing days are over. The jazz baby dies at age 59. Family reunions are unpredictable events.
Bridget hardly stood a chance.
Get-togethers can strengthen ties.
I mean, he was her father. He's supposed to be a source of comfort and certainty.
Or sever them permanently.
She wanted to destroy the weapon that had caused so much destruction to so many people.
In the 1980s, on Staten Island, New York, Eric Goodridge is a pillar of the West African expat community. A Liberian migrant admired for his business prowess.
A good member of the community, an interesting and active participant in the immigrant community.
He was almost like a political big shot in his home country. And he was respected in his community.
But behind closed doors, there is another Eric. One that his 2 young daughters know intimately.
Eric was very skilled at hiding his true nature. The community thought he was a great guy. His family knew different.
believes in old-fashioned corporal punishment, but takes it to a sadistic level.
It was physical abuse. It was getting beaten with a reed so that it would open up wounds on her. Forcing her to take red hot pepper and mixing it with water and flour into like a paste and putting this red hot pepper into her open wounds.
Red pepper is the same element that's in mace, which is what police use to control crowds during riots. It is incredibly caustic. It burns nerve endings.
For Bridget, there is nowhere to hide. Not even when she's tucked into bed.
Eric Goodrich, he was a pedophile who was incestuous. I mean, I don't know how much worse it gets.
The abuse starts when Bridget is 3.
That kind of abuse is a recipe for disaster, for an explosion down the road.
When Eric returns to Liberia in 1992, 12-year-old Bridget is taken too. But the abuse isn't left behind. For the next 5 years, her torment continues.
Daddy, please. Please, no, stop.
Oh, baby, I'm sorry. Our father continually made excuses. I'm just teaching you how this happens, how this works. This is what a father is supposed to do to a daughter.
Touch me! Just move! Get out! Get out of my room! Get out now! Get out! Just get out of my room! You only keep that in one night?
The fact that Bridget was abused for so long certainly had to contribute to her feeling that her life was nothing more than being abused. And she'd had it.
At 18, Bridget is legally able to escape her father's grip. Fleeing Liberia, she returns to New York. By her mid-20s, and with her father some 4,000 miles away, Bridget finally builds a life for herself as a security guard.
She had a job, she was making money, she was supporting herself, she had a decent apartment in a decent neighborhood, she had a network of friends. Despite the horrors that she was subjected to, she had made it on her own, and God bless her for doing that. She deserves a lot of credit for getting as far as she did.
But when she visits her older sister in 2007, old wounds are ripped open.
Daddy's here.
When Eric comes back into the scene, Bridget is absolutely repulsed and horrified and scared.
Seeing her abuser close to her niece triggers overwhelming memories.
How you doing, Bridget? The straw that broke the camel's back was when she saw her father, Eric, floating around Carlene's daughter, who was 5 years old.
I think she snapped. She suffered a flood of emotions. For a moment, that little girl on Daddy's lap was Bridget, and she couldn't take it.
This is her abuser, and he's going near someone she loves, who's vulnerable, very vulnerable.
He barged in here. He's family.
Bridget confronts her sister.
Sex with me.
Their discussion reveals another terrible family secret. Carlene is also a victim of Eric's abuse.
She had actually confirmed that he had been abusive sexually to her sister Carlene.
More chilling still are Eric's travel plans. When he flies back to Africa, he'll be taking his granddaughter.
That made Bridget realize that nobody was going to take action to protect this girl. And what she perceived was there were two choices. He could go on, or she could stop him.
Rockaway, New York, 2007. 26-year-old Bridget Harris survives years of sexual molestation at the hands of her father. Now she fears he's grooming a new victim, his 5-year-old granddaughter.
In Bridget's mind, it came to a head between her and her father before anyone else was victimized, and that was her priority.
Bridget decides to confront Eric and scours the internet for help.
She had prepared some articles regarding the effects of incest and rape, and she wanted to present that to her dad.
But Bridget isn't relying on diplomacy alone. She has a backup plan.
She'd been contemplating figuring out a way to disable him from perpetrating the same kind of horrible violence he perpetrated on her and her sister.
July 28, 2007. Bridget invites her father to her apartment. A one-on-one intervention. She wants him to acknowledge the hurt he's caused.
Psychologists and psychiatrists that treat adult survivors of child sex abuse do not recommend that the victim and the abuser sit down for a confrontation without professional guidance. But that's what Bridget tried to do, and it had disastrous consequences.
You was that little, how could you remember?
Of course I
When
remember.
Eric denies his crimes, Bridget snaps.
What? What are you gonna do?
When Eric Goodridge denied he ever touched Bridget, it tripped off, it triggered a rage.
When children suffer long-standing abuse at the hands of a parent who's supposed to love them, sometimes they fight back.
Let go of me, don't touch me! Let go! Let go of me, don't touch me! Oh.
Furniture was broken. She used a pepper spray. He's screaming.
Using the tools of her trade, a can of mace and handcuffs, Bridget subdues her father. Bridget smothers Eric's screams by stuffing a towel in his mouth. Eric is now helpless, bound, gagged, motionless. But Bridget isn't done. She wants to destroy his weapon of abuse.
She tries to cut his penis off with the scissors, and it won't work. And then she remembers, oh, I have those blades. And she comes back, and she severs his penis.
Amputation is not enough.
She wanted to destroy the weapon that had caused so much destruction to so many people. So initially, she burns it on her stove. Then she takes it with her. She calls 911.
Someone's bleeding to death.
Bridget calls for help for her father, but makes sure his manhood can't be restored.
Bridget was so frightened that doctors might be able to reattach her father's penis, she made sure they couldn't and threw it in the ocean. Goodbye, Daddy. Assaulting her father that way must have been a very cathartic experience for her. Finally, she was the one in control.
Paramedics arrive too late to save Eric. But he hasn't bled to death. He suffocates.
If the towel is pushed far enough back, that it's going to be impossible for the tongue to extricate that towel. Securing it is going to ensure that the person cannot take a breath at all.
Bridget insists she didn't set out to kill her dad, and that her online research proves it.
She had gone online and she researched John Bobbitt, who's a very famous case in America of a man who was caught cheating by his wife, and she severed his penis, and it showed that he lived.
Cutting off a penis is usually not a lethal wound. There's a large amount of blood loss, but it's not sufficient to cause death.
Bridget didn't want her father to die. She wanted him to be sexually helpless.
The prosecution isn't convinced, and Bridget is charged with second-degree murder. She undergoes psychiatric assessment.
Bridget did have a psychological evaluation by both the defense expert and by the prosecutor's expert. They both kind of came to the same conclusion.
That Bridget suffers from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Oftentimes, people who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder have flashbacks to the event that caused them the horrible stress in the first place. And these flashbacks can be overwhelming.
Bridget's life story touches the jury. On September 30th, 2009, she is convicted of the lesser offense, manslaughter.
They didn't follow the law, and instead they followed their sympathy and their empathy.
Some of the jurors wrote to the trial judge saying that she had done enough time and she should be released.
I told the judge, Judge, you let her out right now, she could come live with me.
But the judge is in no mood for mercy.
He reprimanded them, and he basically said, you got caught up in a whirlwind of emotion. You showed mercy, I will show none.
Bridget Harris receives the maximum sentence, 5 to 15 years in jail.
She knows what she did was wrong, and she knows she needed to be punished for what she did.
She is eligible for parole in 2012.
If Bridget gets good psychotherapy in prison, she may be able to function well when she gets out, but she will always have the memory of what her father did to her.
These deadly women brutally severed their family ties. Marie Robards sacrificed one parent to be with the other. Dorothy Ellingson took partying to a lethal level. And Bridget Harris cut ties with Dad to save others. All three had very different reasons for turning on their flesh and blood. But the result was the same. They were their parents' peril.
Look how beautiful you are. You are.
Children deserve love and protection from their mothers. But some women should never give birth.
Quiet! It's very, very hard for people to understand how a mother could kill her children, but it happens.
A mom wants to possess her children at any cost.
It's by far the most shocking crime I've covered in my career.
A devout Christian mistakes delusions for divine messages.
And the voices were telling her that this was not a place for her children to be.
And a Philadelphia mom keeps lethal secrets for decades.
One death is horrible. A second death is suspicious. A third death is a crime.
When these deadly women snap, it results in the murder of innocents. the idyllic town of Skene, Scotland.
3 kids.
Okay, 3.
It's the new home to American couple Teresa and Pasquale Riggi.
They were the all-American couple who seemed to have it all. They moved because of his job to the United Kingdom in 1990, and thereafter, for a period of several years, were very happily married couple.
They put down roots and start thinking about raising a family in Scotland.
So do you know what the success rate for IVF is?
But a natural pregnancy eludes them. They turn to IVF. It takes several years, but finally, in December 2001, the gift they want, twin boys. Friend Amber Siebold remembers the joy.
She seemed like a very loving mother, very kind and very together as well. She was always immaculate. Her children were always immaculate. You know, they were always well fed.
Teresa's besotted by her boys. She puts them before everyone else, even her husband.
Teresa immediately banished her husband from their marital bed and brought the babies into the bed and slept with them there.
Scotland and IVF turn out to be wonderfully fruitful for the Riggis. Pasquale is earning good money, and after 3 years, they have another child, daughter Cecilia. But Teresa's love for her children is starting to become an obsession.
Princess party next year?
Yeah.
She didn't let her children socialize with anybody around them, largely keeping them inside the house.
You want to have a princess party for your birthday?
TV reporter James Matthews discovered it wasn't just the children staying indoors.
She didn't engage with the outside world to any degree herself.
It's very nice. You're going to color that.
Mom, why can't we go to school like other kids?
Teresa didn't even trust the education department, insisting on homeschooling them.
You're much safer here with me.
She had talked about how she had had a hard time in high school, and that's why she wanted to homeschool her children.
They need to interact with other kids. Why can't you see that?
They're not going, and that's final!
Obsessed with her children, Teresa leaves her husband out in the cold.
I want a divorce.
Pasquale now has little sway in the household. The two parents drift apart.
She talked about, you know, their differences in sort of parenting from the beginning, and they just became her all as soon as they were there. So nobody else mattered anymore.
Finally, Pasquale has enough. He moves out of the family home. Teresa reacts badly, not because her husband leaves her, but he now has visitation with their children for 4 hours every week.
She was absolutely devastated. She just couldn't imagine even 4 hours a week without them.
Teresa Riggi had, among other things, a paranoid personality.
No one is safe from Teresa's paranoia.
I had an Easter party at my house that her and the children came to. She had little sort of locator things.
Can we go now?
So if she couldn't see them, she would just press the button and it would beep. If they were out of her sight for a second, she would be, "Where are you? Austin, where are you?"
Luke?
Just getting upset.
Look what I found!
Austin?
Putting electronic tags on the kids was an example of the crazy thinking that was going on in her head. That's an extreme thing to do to little kids.
Where have you been?
Just over there.
Well, that's not good enough. I told you to come straight back when you heard the beep.
Alarmed by this sort of behavior, Pasquale decides he has to act. He petitions for full custody of all 3 children. Teresa could soon lose everything, but she has no intention of letting that happen.
I just remember her saying if he ever got custody of them, you know, he would never see them again, something along those lines. And what I really remember is her face, because it was like pure determination. You know, she wasn't gonna let that happen under any circumstances.
3 kids. Okay, 3 kids.
When California couple Teresa and Pasquale Riggi first moved to Scotland, they wanted a family. And with some help from IVF, they now have one.
They need to interact with other kids. Why
But
can't
it's
you see
falling
that?
apart.
Going, and that's final.
Teresa's obsessed with her children and won't let them out of her sight.
You're so beautiful.
Pasquale has moved out, and he files for full custody. The war of the Riggis is about to take a tragic turn.
She phoned Pasquale Riggi at 11:30 at night
Are you planning on taking the children away
and
from me?
asked him, "Are you trying to take my children away from me?" His reply was, "Well, you've left me with no choice." And she said,
Say goodbye then.
she hung up the phone.
On August 4th, 2010, Teresa takes family law into her own hands. Turning on 8-year-old Austin.
It is utterly shocking when you think about what these kids must have experienced, what they must have seen, and how desperate they must have felt. It is utterly horrific.
One by one, Teresa chases down her children.
They saw her coming, they tried to stop her. She probably chased them around the apartment. Each of them saw her doing this.
Each of the children was stabbed 8 times, mostly in the chest, but in other parts of their bodies, in the hands and on the arms. In killing the children, she used 3 different knives.
The last one to die saw their 2 siblings killed by her. It's one of the worst murder scenes I can think of.
There was blood everywhere in the house, in the bathroom, in the kitchen, at the breakfast bar, on the oven hob. It was a scene of carnage.
If Teresa couldn't have her children, nobody could.
I think there was anger and revenge at Pasquale involved in how she killed her children. You think I'm not serious? Watch this. You think you can take my children? Watch this. This is a very, very deadly woman.
But the senseless brutality isn't over. Teresa starts on herself.
Slashing her throat a number of times, stabbing herself in the chest and abdomen.
She's intent on dying with her children, but just can't seem to pull it off.
There were 2 separate ligatures hanging from the 2nd floor landing, one a dressing gown cord, the other a pair of hair straighteners.
After unsuccessfully stabbing, then strangling herself, Teresa turns to fire.
She then started an explosion in the house by disconnecting the gas hob.
But still, Teresa is alive. She resorts to the apartment balcony.
She was seen to climb on the railing by neighbors, swayed for around a minute, shouted, "I can't believe what's happening to me."
My children!
Don't jump!
Oh, God!
And then threw herself off that second-floor balcony.
But a car breaks her fall. Teresa is rushed to the hospital and survives. The small Scottish town of Skene is in disbelief. The family that kept to themselves has been decimated.
To think about what that must have been like for them at their age, trying to understand why their mother, who they loved with all their hearts, was hurting them so badly. I can't begin to wrap my head around that.
Teresa never planned to answer for her crimes. She thought she'd be dead.
Number one, she was diagnosed as being narcissistic. Number two, she was diagnosed as being paranoid. And number three, she was diagnosed with histrionic personality disorder. This is a condition in where the person thrives on extreme drama.
Despite the diagnosis, Scottish authorities deemed Teresa competent to stand trial. She pleads guilty to 3 counts of culpable murder and is sentenced to 16 years.
I think it wasn't long enough what she was sentenced to, because it wasn't even the sum total of how long they had lived.
Teresa thought of her children as possessions, who she would rather destroy than share. She leaves a stricken husband and a community in shock. All Teresa has now are her deadly deeds.
Teresa Ruggie has never expressed any remorse. Psychiatrists who have examined her say that she continues to believe that God was calling her and her children home.
What Teresa wanted was to make her husband pay and suffer the rest of his life over what she did. And making her husband suffer was more important than the life she had created.
When a mother hears deluded messages
This was a very ugly world, that this was not a place for her children to be.
about what's best for her children,
She thought she was doing something good for her children.
the unthinkable can happen.
The voices tell the person horrible things about themselves, and it can make the individual very, very dangerous to other people.
Setting the right example is important to Milwaukee mom Elise Ledvina. In 1997, she runs a strict household, bringing up her 2 sons, Joe, 9, and John Jr., 8, to obey their parents and the Lord.
May the Lord make us true.
Her faith was probably the cornerstone of her life. She was devoutly religious, and she raised her children to be religious as well.
34-year-old Elise and her accountant husband, John, are respected and active members of their church community.
They were heavily involved in the church. She was on church committees. She was a volunteer at church. She sang in the choir. She was known at the Catholic school where her sons, went as a good mother.
Father.
But all is not as it seems. Elise has a dark secret. She is a troubled soul who hears voices.
Elise heard voices in her head, known as auditory hallucinations. That type of hallucination, voices, they're not fun, they're not kind. The voices tell the person horrible things about themselves and sometimes about other people.
And the voices have a grim message for Elise.
Her delusion was that she was a bad mother, she was psychotic.
Elise believes the power of prayer will solve her problems. But faith alone can't help. She's suffering from a serious mental illness, schizophrenia.
Schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder, thought disorders, generally emerge when the individual is in their late teens to early to mid-20s. Elise appeared completely normal until she was in her mid-20s, and then the psychoses took over.
When Elise's illness starts in the early 1990s, her concerned family insist she get medical help.
Her struggles with mental illness became more visibly apparent. There was a brief hospitalization. She was seeing a psychiatrist, diagnosed with a socioaffective disorder, was placed on antipsychotic medication. Medication was clearly critical in order for her to function in society and to not be delusional.
But Elise doesn't trust the medication. She has more faith in the voices than pills.
Part of the nature of the illness schizophrenia is that the patient is suspicious of medication. They think it's poison. They become paranoid about the medication, and that's one of the reasons they don't want to take it.
Elise's husband, John, does everything he can to support his wife.
Friends and neighbors reported that they thought Elise was perfectly normal. And there were some days I'm sure she probably did come across that way. Her own husband didn't know how really sick she was.
Please, I promise it'll...
Boys, hey, go make the call, okay?
Please.
Without her medication, her behavior becomes so erratic by 1994 that John decides he must leave Elise for his son's sake.
Please. John.
For a time, the boys had gone to live with their grandparents because of their mother's instability. So there were obviously signs of great trouble within the family and within the home.
But marriage is a sacred vow, and after a year living apart, the devout Christians try again.
Are you taking your pills?
And Elise is taking her pills.
I'm about to take one here. Do you want to follow?
After they reunite, they had a couple of good years where it looked like the medication was working, the treatment was working, and that they would be a successful family after all.
But soon Elise stops her meds, and the voices are back.
Lord, I pray. These are very, very strong medications that do help, but they don't work if they're left in the bathroom. The meds have to be taken every day.
But when this mom's not taking her pills, bad things will happen.
Elise did not have a history of violence. She did not have a history of outbursts or anything that would indicate what would happen next.
Don't listen to you.
I'll try not to be.
Milwaukee couple, Elise and John Ledvina, seem to have a good life with their 2 sons. The committed Christians are pillars of their local church. But Elise is fighting her own demons, schizophrenia. She stops taking her medication, and her delusions return.
Elise didn't want to take the medication. She didn't like the way it made her feel. And this is typical of a lot of schizophrenics. They start taking the medication, and then they think, well, I'm well now. I don't need to take it.
I can hear you.
The voices are more controlling, and their message more chilling.
And the voices were telling her that this was a very ugly world, that this was not a place for her children to be. So she's thinking about that. She's hearing these voices, and she's making a plan.
August 26th, 1997. Elise washes up after the evening meal. Her two boys have gone their separate ways. 8-year-old John Jr. plugs into his asthma treatment machine in the basement. 9-year-old Joe retires to his room.
This was an idyllic scene. It was sort of at first this normal middle American summer evening.
But it's not. Elise believes she's receiving divine messages.
Her religious faith spun into delusions at the time of the murder.
Elise's delusion was that she had to kill the children so their souls would go to heaven. Apparently, her delusion also told her she needed to do it with a baseball bat.
The most vulnerable child, little John, is attacked first.
That 8-year-old boy probably never saw what was coming. He was taking his treatment when his mother came in there and started swinging that bat. He really didn't have a chance.
Elise?
The father hears thumping sounds coming from the basement. He has to take time to rush in, and she's still hitting her son with the bat.
What are you doing? Oh, God!
He takes that bat from her, holds her down.
Struggling to hold on to his wife, John calls for help.
While he was calling 911, she took the bat and rushed upstairs and started attacking her second son, Joe. Who would think, you know, your mother who had just prepared dinner for you would suddenly try to murder you with a baseball bat. It doesn't get more horrific than that.
For Elise, beating the boys with a baseball bat was a way to dispatch them to heaven. The blood didn't matter.
This time, John manages to stop his wife. Both boys are rushed to the hospital. 8-year-old John Jr. can't be saved. He dies of skull fractures.
He would have lost consciousness very rapidly. Death would have taken a matter of minutes after that. In all likelihood, he would have been dead 10 or 15 minutes later.
Miraculously, 9-year-old Joe survives. His father's actions save his life.
His father made it upstairs in time and was able to wrestle his wife off of the boy.
Fortunately, her second son did not receive as many blows as her first son. He probably only received 2 or 3, maybe 4 blows, enough to cause skull fracture and some underlying brain injury.
There is no question about who commits these crimes. Police arrest Elise at the scene.
She was immediately charged with the most serious offenses under Wisconsin law: first-degree intentional homicide and attempted first-degree intentional homicide.
For what we are about to receive,
Elise offers a shocking explanation as to why she attacks her sons.
She thought they would be better off because she couldn't provide them with a good life in this society because it was too twisted, and the bad influences of television and so forth. So she thought she was doing something good for her children by murdering them.
Lord, be with me. Lord.
It's not unusual for people suffering with certain types of schizophrenia to believe that God is talking to them. It's known as religious ideation, and it can make the individual very, very dangerous to other people.
Elise is found criminally insane and is committed to a mental institution.
This is one of those tragic cases. She was a woman who actually loved her children, and her mental illness drove her to do the unthinkable.
In 2007, after being committed for 10 years, she is released on the condition she never contacts her former family.
She was ordered by the judge to never have contact with John Ledvina, and she was also ordered to have no contact with her surviving son. And there was a termination of her parental rights.
The court hears testimony from prominent psychiatrists that now Elise is medicated, she's stable. Her dangerous religious delusions, a thing of the past. But not everyone thinks justice has been served.
As a member of the community, I'm disturbed that Elise Ledvina got out. And I think anyone who's capable of murdering their own child is always going to be, in some level, a threat to society. I think this is the most cold-hearted crime that could be committed for a mother who brings a child into this world to be capable of murdering that child, and in such a heinous manner.
Some psychologists and psychiatrists would say that society is safe from Elise. Maybe they're right, and maybe they're wrong. But I would not let Elise babysit for me.
Having a family is one of life's greatest thrills.
She had baby after baby after baby.
For most new parents.
They observe how distant Marino was.
But not in this house.
One death is horrible. A second death is suspicious.
Shut up!
A third death is a crime.
Shut up!
Imagine going blind overnight. In 1949, it happened to 20-year-old Philadelphia wife, Marie No. Her husband, Arthur, rushes her to the hospital.
They're, of course, very freaked out, and they're trying to figure out what's going on because they see there's no physical reason for her to be blind.
The doctors conclude Marie's blindness is caused by severe emotional stress.
Marie suffered what is known as hysterical blindness. She would really become blind and not be able to see. But it was psychologically induced, a psychosomatic reaction to stress.
It should be the happiest time of her life. 6 weeks earlier, Marie gives birth to their first child, Richard. But caring for a newborn is a struggle for the first-time mom.
There were issues with vomiting, there were issues with underweight, there were issues with feeding. She had a hard time feeding her kids. She got very frustrated when they wouldn't eat.
Things go from difficult to heartbreaking. Arthur returns home from work on April 7th to discover Richard's still body in his crib.
Marie, he's not breathing! Only lived for 31 days. A determination was made by the hospital that he died from congestive heart failure.
Losing a child is a parent's worst nightmare. Doctors believe the psychological trauma brings on Marie's blindness.
So they go through this incredible experience. They have a baby, they lose a baby, then she goes blind. Then they have to treat her for that. But they want to have other kids, so they move on.
Marie's vision soon returns, and 18 months later, the couple is blessed with a second child, a healthy little girl, Elizabeth. Arthur is delighted. Having a family is his dream. But Marie still finds motherhood difficult.
Marino was a simple-minded, uneducated, probably an immature adult. I believe she was unable to be a mother.
When baby Elizabeth becomes ill, Marie makes frantic calls for help.
Thank you. Hurry, please hurry.
When Elizabeth was 5 months old, Marie started having interactions with doctors and hospitals again.
Please, I need some help.
She claimed that she found her vomiting blood.
Blood everywhere.
And during a course of a number of backs and forth with the doctor, she was found and brought dead to a hospital.
The death of her babies is too much for Marie. She seeks counsel from her priest.
She wanted to get her tubes tied.
I just don't want to lose another baby.
I know.
She was about to do it, and she went to see her priest, and her priest told her it would be a sin.
A mortal sin.
So she didn't do it.
The church wouldn't allow it. So instead, she had baby after baby after baby.
Marie is very fertile. In the next 12 years, she gives birth to 6 more children. 2 are stillborn, but the other 4, 3 girls and a boy, are in good health when they leave the hospital. But Marie's never a mother for long. One after the other, her babies die.
People were sympathetic to them. I don't think there was any suspicion at all at that point that any of them had anything to do with this, that it was just what happened.
But one person is suspicious. The new medical examiner.
She specialized in pediatric forensic work. And she was the first one to do one of the autopsies and question what was going on here.
Marino was always alone when these deaths occurred. She always indicated that she either found the baby in the crib or the playpen. The bottom line in each of these deaths was it was an unexplained death.
Without any real evidence, the authorities' hands are tied. And Marie soon gives birth to her 9th baby, Catherine. Concerned doctors take drastic action. The little girl isn't sick, but they keep her in the hospital for months, where nurses can keep a close eye on Catherine and her mother.
They observed lots of things about the nose in terms of how distant Marino was.
And Marie's baby talk is chilling.
One of the nurses said that she watched her having trouble feeding and put in the chart that she said,
"Eat this or I'll kill you."
But a healthy baby can't be nursed forever. When Catherine is 3 months old, Marie's allowed to take her home, but doctors fear for her future.
One of the doctors wrote, "I hope she lives long enough to grow her fingernails long enough to fight her off." So, I mean, there's real drama here, and everybody is afraid something bad's gonna happen.
Philadelphia couple, Marie and Arthur No, seem cursed. Starting in 1949, Marie gives birth to 8 children. They all die before they can crawl.
"Eat this or I'll kill you."
Doctors keep her 9th child, Catherine, in the hospital for 3 months. But Catherine isn't sick, and reluctantly they allow Marie to take her home.
The doctors and nurses were onto her, and yet there was nothing they could really do to prevent the child from going home.
Marie has borne many children, but she's no mother. She can't cope with Catherine and constantly calls her doctor for guidance. Marie's stories become more outlandish.
One day, I think at 8 months, Marie tells this crazy story.
She must have pulled it up one of Art's suits.
The baby stopped breathing because she pulled a dry cleaning bag off a hanger and it almost asphyxiated her.
Catherine survives the incident, but doesn't live for long. On the morning of February 25th, 1966, she's home alone with Mom when she dies in her crib.
She lived for 14 months. She was a real kid. People knew her, people played with her, the family got to know her.
The news devastates the hospital staff that tried so hard to protect Catherine.
It was heartbreaking for everybody when they were unable to save her. And by that time, her death did trigger the first real investigation. Within hours, the investigators from the medical examiner's office were there to interview the Noes as if they were possible suspects.
But investigators can't find any sign of foul play, and no charges are filed. Catherine's death is put down to a tragic reality of the times.
No one had the slightest idea why kids died at that time. It was all speculation. The rules for how kids died were being changed like every week.
The following year, the unthinkable happens. Marie gives birth to baby number 10, Arthur Jr.
Obviously, everybody was scared to death by this point. They were under investigation. They didn't know how suspected they were by this point. And so again, the baby was kept in the hospital for a really long time, as long as they could.
Medical staff are shocked that Marie and Arthur only visit their son twice in the hospital.
It's no surprise to me that when Marie and Art's last child was hospitalized for 3 months, that Marie only visited twice. Marie never wanted to be a mother.
Only weeks after baby Arthur goes home, the cycle of near-death incidents begin.
The reasons why the babies weren't breathing were getting sort of more and more ridiculous. The family cat had smothered the baby's face, and so she had to bring the baby in because that's why the baby wasn't breathing. That's almost like a joke.
But Arthur's death is no laughing matter. He passes away on January 2nd, 1968.
Again, the minute he died, the medical examiner's office was again investigating this case.
Quiet! But the investigation goes nowhere and is dropped. For 30 years, the deaths remain a mystery, until journalist Stephen Freed hears of a very similar case of baby deaths that was proven to be murder. He starts digging into Marie's life.
When we were trying to convince people why this 30-year-old case should be reopened, the only explanation for it was that 8 kids had died without any justice.
The case is reopened, and in the 1990s, a lot more is known about the psychological makeup of mothers who kill. Marie No fits their profile to a T.
She was a woman indicative of many of the traits of people that commit infanticide. Primitive, psychologically inept person who couldn't be a mother and decided to end the lives of her children. One death is horrible, a second death is suspicious, a third death is a crime. All these deaths, the 8, were as a result of suffocation by Marie No.
There are probably several reasons why Marie didn't come under suspicion for murdering her children for a very long time. One of them is the last thing anyone wants to think is that a mother would kill their own innocent, defenseless baby.
So tell me, Marie, how did you do it?
With caution.
All of them?
I think so. I can't remember them all.
When prosecutors finally catch up with Marie, she is 70 years old. To everyone's surprise, she quickly confesses.
After she was confronted with a determination made by the medical examiner, she said, yes, I did commit these crimes.
Marie may have admitted the murders after getting away with it for so long, because they say confession is good for the soul.
50 years after the murder of her first child, Marie No is brought to justice, but she won't go to jail. She is sentenced to 5 years house arrest and 20 years probation on the condition she lets mental health experts examine her to learn more about infanticide. Her devoted husband, Arthur, still doesn't believe she's guilty.
He made it very clear that he never would have stayed with somebody for all that time if he had the slightest doubt.
I can understand that love is blind, but I also understand that for Art to really admit to himself that his wife murdered their children would have been an unbearable truth.
Eat this or I'll kill you.
These deadly women brought life into the world and then took it away.
Austin?
Teresa Riggi thought her children were possessions. Elise Ledvina gave in to the voices in her head. And Marie No could make babies, but couldn't care for them. All 3 women destroyed the precious bond between mother and child. It was the murder of innocence. For some women, family isn't everything.
It takes motivation. It takes some planning. But most of all, it takes a lack of feeling.
Blood ties mean nothing.
She's just in the grip of this compulsive need to administer death.
Age is no barrier.
Wasn't there some option? Wasn't there some alternative to killing your own children?
Nor is love.
The people that she killed
A little bit more.
were people that were close to her.
These deadly women dispose of those closest to them, quietly killing, with hearts of stone. New York City in the 1860s. Home to police officer Edward Struck, his wife Lydia, and their 6 children.
Struck was somebody who obviously was struggling to support this large brood.
What are you reading?
They manage the best they can until a public scandal takes away their livelihood.
Edward, dear. You're home.
I am.
You said you had something to talk to me about.
I have. Not good news.
What is it?
I've lost my employment.
Struck's career as a police officer came to a very abrupt end.
Edward, how did this happen?
I don't know. They say it was an impropriety.
An impropriety? What does
He was accused of cowardice, and he was fired from the force.
God. Well, Edward, what's going to happen to us?
I don't know.
The shame is too much for Edward.
How are we going to eat?
He plunged into a depression and became increasingly really a kind of housebound invalid.
Who is going to feed us?
He started to become a heavy burden on the family.
A burden his wife Lydia does not wish to carry. She has a plan. A way Edward can help ease the load. His life insurance policy.
When Lydia, as a young adult, faced adversity, her solution was to kill him.
Edward's tea will have an extra ingredient today. Arsenic. Easily obtained in the 1860s.
Lydia had no trouble at all just going to the local druggist and getting very, very, very large amount of arsenic.
Here's some tea.
This toxic drug is also simple to administer. But it is by no means a gentle death.
They look like they're in distress, and they are. The inner part of the stomach starts to slough away. And there is great irritation. There's bleeding. Then they get diarrhea. And then they start to get convulsions following that.
Edward Struck probably suffered more than Jack the Ripper's victims. Jack the Ripper murdered his victims very, very swiftly.
No one suspects foul play from a wife and mother.
This would have been a good way to cause a death, and to cause it unsuspectingly, because it could mimic consumption.
One death is not enough for Lydia. Now, she has a hunger for more than money.
I think Lydia had developed a taste for murder.
And those closest to her are the most in danger. Children rely on their mother for nourishment. But tonight, Lydia is serving death. Lethal doses of arsenic.
Poisoning is a common method of homicide that we see women involved in. They can be close to the person, feed them food, or get them a drink as if they care about them, when in fact they've just put a nail in their coffin.
Lydia starts with the most vulnerable.
Please check my baby first.
Certainly. Let me take a look.
Her taste for murder has developed into an unhealthy appetite.
Sorry.
She enjoyed wielding the power of life or death over another person.
Would you check my son?
How long has he been sick?
2-3 hours. He's very pale.
He certainly is very pale.
even if that other person was her own innocent children.
Once Lydia starts killing, she can't stop.
She's become addicted to murder.
Her own children. It would have been easier and certainly more moral for her to simply give them up to an orphanage.
All of it? Drink all of it for me. That's it.
In Victorian times, it's believed the gentler sex is incapable of serial murders.
You're seeing somebody who is driven, by extremely deep and deranged and perverted sadistic impulses.
Lydia Sherman changes perceptions forever.
We don't know exactly what made Lydia tick. What we do know is that by the time she was a young adult, a young mother,
Very good for your cough.
she was a sociopath.
In less than 2 years, Lydia Sherman's entire family is dead without anyone suspecting murder.
One would think that would have been enough. She was free of her family. She was free to do anything she wanted now. But she chose to marry again.
New York City in 1871. The merry widow, Lydia Sherman, marries again. Wealthy Connecticut farmer Dennis Hurlburt has no idea he's in love with a serial killer.
Male serial murderers tend to prey on strangers, whereas female serial murderers tend to prey on acquaintances and loved ones and family members, people they have some sort of intimate relationship with.
The happiness she displayed outwardly to the world about her new husband was completely false.
Just months into the marriage, Dennis is dead.
She married him for his money and planned to kill him all along.
Lydia inherits his substantial wealth. She has money and freedom, but it is not enough.
With serial murders, of course, is once they commit one murder, they sometimes develop this taste for it.
She is now addicted to killing.
Every time she got away with it, it bought her next murder.
Lydia has no trouble finding new victims. Next is widower Horatio Sherman.
Mrs. Holden, Horatio Sherman is my name.
Hello, Mr. Sherman.
She enters his home as nanny to his 2 young children.
For me that you make a mighty fine housekeeper.
One of the most frightening aspects of these psychopathic killers is the extent to which they can simulate
We'd be honest.
normal human reactions and behavior.
Horatio soon falls for Lydia's charm.
She then married her final husband, and the one who, gave her the name by which she is best known, Lydia Sherman.
But Lydia is not happy sharing the home with Horatio's children. She resorts to old, bad habits. First, she kills little Frankie, then Ada,
For Lydia, killing took on a nature of its own. It became a method whereby she dealt with problems.
Horace, to the class. Pull yourself together. Turn away. Turn away.
Her solution wasn't to leave herself. It wasn't to talk things out. It was to kill them.
her heartbroken husband turns to alcohol.
I'm so sorry.
Just leave me be. Please, go now.
It is a fatal mistake.
There's no indication that Sherman ever felt any sort of twinge of guilt or remorse.
Sorry. We'll be soon. I'll leave you alone.
That actually is one of the defining characteristics of a psychopathic personality, is a complete absence of a conscience.
But this is the last time Lydia will enjoy the pleasure of killing. The family doctor orders an autopsy. Massive doses of arsenic are discovered. In 1872, Lydia is arrested and convicted of her husband's murder. The next year, she confesses to killing 3 husbands and 7 children. Lydia Sherman is sentenced to life in prison. The nation is stunned.
She was very, very notorious. There were ballads written about her. There were nursery rhymes sung about her. They made Lydia Sherman really into a kind of huge criminal celebrity.
The Queen of Poison introduces the world to the horrific concept of the female serial killer.
Thank goodness Lydia was caught and taken away from society, because I don't believe she ever would have stopped poisoning people. It was in her blood, so to speak. She liked it. She knew it was wrong. She did it anyway. And there's an endless supply of potential victims.
The birth of a baby is a happy occasion.
Everything seemed to be perfectly normal.
But this joyous event is marred by a strange tension.
There was something amiss in her makeup.
This new mother has prayed for a boy because in her mind, girls are not wanted.
The way she saw it, that child's presence was ruining her marriage.
The town of Brighton, Illinois, 1981. Young Paula Sims sets up house with her new husband, Rob. They seem like an average working-class couple.
a factory worker and his wife trying to get a piece of the American dream, buying a house, having a family, and it all sounded perfectly normal.
5 years later, there is a problem. It should be a happy occasion. The birth of their daughter, Lorelei. But Robert senses something wrong.
Paula was heard early after the delivery of Lorelei, in essence, apologizing to Robert.
Way to go.
I'm sorry.
Paula has her heart set on a boy.
But we wanted a boy.
You got a girl.
There's no joy for this first-time mom.
She had a girl instead of a boy. This caused Paula to have serious postpartum depression, accompanied by high anxiety. This is a clinical chemical imbalance that comes over them. Women that are clinically depressed, postpartum depression, should not be taking care of their babies alone.
Paula has a plan to regain her happiness. A plan that requires a heart of stone.
Even though Paula loved her baby girl, she saw only one answer to her problem. And it was to eliminate the source of the pain.
Tonight in the Sims house, bath time is going to be different. No girls allowed. In 1981, young mother Paula Sims is suffering postpartum depression. She can't cope and has an unthinkable solution.
Paula let her baby drown in the bathtub. She said that she thought about going back and stopping it, but then another part of it would say, no, this has to happen. She was apparently very, very conflicted about killing this child. Nevertheless, she did it.
Paula takes her daughter's body out of the house and thinks up an alibi.
Paula Sims claimed that someone had come in to her house. She was asleep downstairs. The child was in a crib. The person came down the steps, grabbed the child, ran up the steps, and ran down the driveway and disappeared.
Illinois police criminal investigator Jim Bivens is on the scene within hours of the reported abduction.
She was remorseful, but it didn't look like, to me, a sincere, honest remorse, especially when a child's abducted from you.
But what's the motive for abducting a tiny baby?
No calls about a ransom or you did this to me, any revenge type involved in it. It got to the point with just the way things were, we figured we'd better start searching right at the house.
It didn't take long. Just 100 yards from the house, they find the tiny remains of baby Lorelei. With no witnesses, no evidence, no arrest is made.
Shortly after the body was found, the Simses left the house and never returned, except to move their belongings after they sold the house.
The Sims move to the city of Alton and start again. They soon have another child, a boy. Paula has what she wants.
I'm pregnant.
But then, another surprise pregnancy.
I thought you'd be happy.
They had agreed not to have any more children. And it's a girl. By the spring of 1989, the pressure of coping with 2 young children is too much for unstable Paula.
She was probably suffering from postpartum depression, and she was medicating herself with a lot of marijuana and alcohol. And nothing really worked, except to get rid of the little baby girl.
Tonight, there will be no bedtime stories in the Sims home.
It takes about 2 minutes to suffocate an infant that way. 2 minutes is a very long time to hold your hand across your daughter's mouth. That's just a horrible thing. Wasn't there some option? Wasn't there some alternative to killing your own children?
But for Paula, there is only one solution. And only one crazy alibi.
Couldn't believe it, especially when they told me the scenario as to how it allegedly went down, and it was almost identical.
Paula? Paula!
Again, Paula blames an intruder.
The only difference that I remember, in Alton, she supposedly got hit in the head.
Where are the kids?
In the kitchen.
This time, she claims a blow to the head knocks her out before her baby is abducted.
Where's Heather?
In our bassinet.
No, she's not.
There was a lot of skepticism in the beginning. We tried to treat the case as much as a kidnapping as possible, but we never discounted the fact that the first case remained open.
4 days later, on the other side of Alton, Heather's body is found. There's something very strange about it.
The body was found to be in near-perfect condition, no signs of decomposition, almost as if she had just died.
A medical examination soon discovers why.
The body had been frozen over some extended period.
Paula has failed to fool police that her baby has been held captive for days. And an everyday trash bag will be her downfall.
That trash bag that we recovered her body in turned out to be a key piece of evidence for us in terms of forensics. The FBI were able to match the perforations and the striations that run through the bag from the mill and matched up those bags with a roll of curbside brand trash bags that was inside of Robert and Paula's home.
Faced with all the evidence, Paula Sims finally confesses to murdering both her daughters. In 1990, she is sentenced to life in prison without parole.
No one can ever understand why a mother would kill one of their children, let alone two.
Paula is not dangerous to the general population walking around, living their lives. Paula was only dangerous to her girl children.
Lumberton, North Carolina, 1970. A common household tragedy.
Thomas had been smoking in bed and started the fire by himself.
He burns to death in his own bed.
Everyone felt so badly for poor Velma. Her husband burned up in this fire.
38-year-old widow, Velma Burke, slowly recovers from her loss. But 3 years later, tragedy strikes her new partner.
Nobody understood what was wrong with him. He already did have health problems. His lungs were shot. He was diabetic. When he died, again, Velma was a sympathetic widow.
Is Velma cursed? Everyone thinks so. Indeed, Velma has known suffering since she was young.
Velma had a dreadful childhood. Her father was an alcoholic. He was abusive. There was so much wrong. You knew she was going to come out of that childhood as damaged goods.
Like many abused children, Velma tries to mask the pain with drugs.
Velma started using prescription drugs and abusing prescription drugs.
She's soon an addict, and doctor shops to get prescriptions.
Velma had a lot of emotional problems and wasn't getting the psychiatric help that she needed.
Without professional help, her addiction gets worse. And Velma becomes desperate for money.
Eventually, Velma got into the same problem many addicts do. She needed to steal to get money to pay for her habit.
Velma! Velma! Yes, Mom? There's a check missing out of my checkbook.
I think you've probably just forgotten and you've
She starts stealing from her mother.
No, Velma.
Velma was addicted to drugs.
Mama, I'm sure you did.
Drugs that would cause her to have wild mood swings. And Velma was a thief.
I'm going to the bank about it.
I really don't think that's necessary, do you?
It was a very, very dangerous combination.
Velma is a desperate addict who has developed a unique coping mechanism: murder.
I should take over the care of my mother now.
She needed money. She didn't want to get caught. She needed the money to medicate because of the pain that she had.
I bought you some soup. I can't eat. I'll make you better in no time.
The whole thing became a vicious cycle for her.
You always say homemade is best.
The weapon of choice is arsenic.
Come on. Come on home. That's it. Okay. Take it slow. Just a little sip.
Poisoning became a way of trying to deal with a problem that she didn't know how else to deal with.
All right. You have a little rest and we'll try again later, huh?
With arsenic, it's very simple to drag the process out. You just give them not quite enough until it all accumulates in your system and they get sicker and sicker and die.
No one suspects Velma.
I'm sorry for your loss.
Because arsenic symptoms mimic normal ailments of the elderly. Velma doesn't get caught for murder, but she does for check fraud. After a short jail term in 1975, she's free to start again.
Montgomery, I have some lovely warm soup for you.
She got a job caring for an elderly man. And his wife was a bit younger than he was, but she had her health problems too.
But Velma also restarts her drug habit. She needs money.
It is an honor and a privilege.
And she's living with easy targets.
Reassuring, thank you.
Anyone around her that made her angry or frustrated or threatened her existence, her freedom, of revealing that she was a thief, was in danger of Velma's wrath.
There you go.
Within a year, Montgomery Edwards is dead. One month later, Dolly also dies.
Murder became a maladaptive behavior for Velma. But it worked. And every time she did it, she got away with it for years.
Velma's circle of death is far from over. In the 1970s, in Lumberton, North Carolina, the people close to Velma Barfield keep turning up dead. Unsuspecting family believe Velma is cursed. But in truth, she's addicted to prescription drugs, and to buy them, she kills. In 1977, Velma meets Stuart Taylor.
He was, by all accounts, a nice young man. They had a good relationship initially. It wasn't long before Velma moved in with Stuart and they were living together.
Stuart has no idea who the real Velma is. When he finds a letter from a prison inmate to his girlfriend,
Honey, what you doing?
he's shocked.
Honey, you never told me about this.
What?
You never told me you were in prison.
What are you doing with
What do you mean, what am I doing? Why are you keeping secrets from me?
This is my...
You can tell me these things. Why are you holding back?
I don't want to go there. It's just...
He was outraged. She did not tell him about her imprisonment.
I'm gonna tell everybody about you and your secrets.
What are you talking about? Don't you dare.
He threatened to expose her, as it were, to other people.
I'm out of here.
Wait, you get back here. What are you talking about? This is your...
I don't trust you anymore. I'm out of here.
You, get out!
That was a triggering event for the sort of flood of Velma's life history crashing down on her.
When Velma is stressed, her prescription drugs are not enough. She needs to end the source of her pain.
She was frightened, and she fell back into her old habits. Rather than leave, she did what she'd always done when she got into a jam or frustrated. She murdered.
But this is one stress release too many. This time, family don't pity Velma. They accuse her. An autopsy of her fourth victim confirms suspicions.
They found the effects of arsenic in his internal organs, and they knew how he had died. That was the beginning of the end for Velma Barfield.
Faced with a watertight murder charge and the prospect of more to come, an interesting thing happens. Velma Barfield confesses to not 4 murders, but 6. Her first husband, Thomas Burke, didn't leave his cigarette burning. Velma set him on fire. And her frail second husband, another poison victim. The surprises don't stop there. Sentenced to death, Velma is locked away from the prescription drugs that fueled her killing. She becomes the angel of death row.
The people in the prison found that she was a really good counselor for disturbed young women. And they would often put the most disturbed young women in cells next to Velma, knowing that she would soothe them.
Could Velma ever make up for the 6 lives she took? Only she knows. On November 2nd, 1984, Velma Barfield is executed by lethal injection.
She could have become a teacher, a counselor, a pastor. She could have spent her life doing good works instead of hurting people.
These deadly women murdered those closest to them. Lydia Sherman disposed of 10 of her family, including her own children. Paula Sims quietly murdered her unwanted baby girls. And for Velma Barfield, killing became a way to relieve stress. All 3 killed loved ones with careful planning and hearts of stone. When a woman thinks her feelings are all that count, she doesn't care who suffers.
There's always somebody out there that wants to hurt someone.
A rowdy teen turns into a callous thug.
There is no other way to describe this but as a hate crime.
A mother doesn't care about other people's children.
She distracted him and then hit him over the head with a hammer.
And a young woman wants to be her friend, literally.
It was an attempt to turn fantasy into reality.
These deadly women killed people who did them no harm. They are heartless souls. Teenagers love to connect.
To them, everything was a game.
Social networking means sharing everything.
They were almost reveling in what they were doing.
Good and bad.
It didn't seem to register that actually they were killing someone.
London, 2008. There's trouble brewing in a middle-class suburb of England's capital city.
Oh, God, stop!
Ruby Thomas is only 16, but is living like an adult.
She had ectopic pregnancy. She was a binge drinker, and it wasn't a great way to start your teenage years.
Ruby, you need to turn that music down.
Her single mom tries to keep Ruby on the straight and narrow.
Ruby's mother was, by all accounts, a hard-working and caring mother.
Have you been drinking? No.
Her mum saved and scrimped in order to get her going to a privately funded school. I think it was something like £16,000 a year.
You young lady are absolutely unbelievable. Close the door.
Ruby is smart and excels in class.
Ruby appeared to be a bright student. She was good at maths and certain other subjects.
But good grades don't make up for her out-of-class behavior.
She was someone that broke the rules. She was wearing makeup at this school where that was against the policy. She reveled in having a reputation for being a hellraiser.
Ruby wants to be the tough girl.
She was very nasty to a lot of the other girls and would call some of them ugly and make them cry.
I think she hated anyone that was perceived to be different. She clearly felt that she could just belittle them, bully them, intimidate them.
You want to show at least a little bit. Like, you want to, you know, he's going to
Ruby was always angry, always looking for a fight. She seemed to try to get herself kicked out. And eventually she was expelled from that school.
Ruby's belligerent behavior worsens.
What are you looking at, young bag? You want a taste?
By the age of 15, Ruby had a criminal record for drunken and loutish behaviour.
But you love a little taste.
Oi, sit down!
Fob off!
Drinking transforms Ruby, the loudmouth, into something more sinister.
Come on, little sweet.
Sit down or get out!
And when she'd consumed alcohol, she became incredibly violent. There was a lot of anger inside her.
Get out!
And it would all come out and explode when she began drinking alcohol.
You know what? Get back, Grandpa.
She was very aggressive. If you were seeing trouble, she probably would have started it, particularly when she was drunk.
Back, Grandpa. Huh?
In 2007, Ruby is convicted of the vicious assault on a bus driver. Being a violent drunk is following in her father's footsteps. 6 years earlier, 11-year-old Ruby idolizes her father.
Daddy's home.
Until the day he doesn't come home.
When Ruby was only 11, her father went to prison for killing a man. He stabbed a taxi cab driver 28 times.
Learning her father is a killer changes everything for Ruby.
I think the moment that her dad went to prison, you could see that family life was just falling apart.
Seeing her father incarcerated for murder might have told her, this is your lot as well. You are his daughter. It was like she couldn't wait to be just like her father.
At an age when most teenagers are thinking about their future, Ruby is caught in her past. With her anger and alcoholism growing, she is a ticking time bomb.
Oh, hello, girls.
All these traumas and problems that were occurring to Ruby culminated in one appalling incident.
They disgust me.
Somewhere, sometime, someone will pay.
Look at him.
She was looking for trouble. She wanted to hurt someone.
Have them.
A loving mother and a private school education can't tame English teenager Ruby Thomas.
Get back, Grandpa.
After her father is convicted of murder, Ruby's life spirals out of control.
Inside, she found it very hard, I think, to deal with the fact that her father wasn't around. But in terms of her exterior, she was someone that just didn't give a damn, really, in terms of what other people thought about her.
Trafalgar Square, a landmark meeting place for Londoners and tourists. On September 25th, 2009, Ruby is there with two friends, 18-year-old Joel Alexander and 17-year-old Rachel Burke.
They formed what one could really describe as a mini gang.
Oh, hello, 8-ball. I can see my reflection in your head.
Ruby starts harassing passers-by for sport.
Hello, farm animal.
I don't know whether she was proving something to her friends or proving something to herself.
You wear it on your head.
Nevertheless, that night, someone was going to get hurt really bad.
Also out on the town is 62-year-old Ian Bonham.
I really thought I lost it. Don't the city. When they didn't call.
Ian was gay, and openly so. Had been for some years. Because of his age, he spent a lot of time hiding his homosexuality, but it's a reflection of the way society has changed in recent years that he felt confident enough to come out.
Ian is a strong advocate for equal rights.
If he saw what he deemed to be an injustice, he would walk in and try and solve the problem. He was well known for this. He wasn't afraid to speak his mind, and he wasn't afraid to challenge people.
So where are we going to go on holiday? How about banging?
But Ian's gay pride isn't welcome tonight. Ian and his friend end up in Trafalgar Square.
Minding their own business, when suddenly Ruby shouts expletives at them after she sees them holding hands.
Faggots!
Ian is outraged by Ruby's homophobic comments and challenges her, quite rightly, to find out why she feels so much anger towards him.
Oh, you didn't like that, huh? Oh, you're not happy?
Ian had no idea who he was dealing with. Ruby was ready to explode, ready to let it go. And Ian, in her mind, provided her with that opportunity. He stood up to her, so he would have to pay.
Where's your girlfriend? Huh?
Vicious verbal altercation followed between Ruby and Ian. And when that ended, Ruby then slashed out at him with her handbag.
Her friend quickly joins in.
Punch which Joel Alexander threw at Ian just knocked him to the ground, and blood started pouring out of his head.
Ian is immediately unconscious. But the teens don't walk away. They sink the boot into their defenseless victim.
You see the crate?
They were still punching and kicking his body, so much so that his head was swinging from side to side. It seemed like a scene from a horror film, really. They were almost reveling in what they were doing.
Both girls were laughing and smiling and shouting obscenities, like a scene out of Clockwork Orange.
Somebody help!
They are fatal blows. If the gang has any remorse, they don't show it.
The girls were later spotted giggling and dancing as they entered a nearby elevator as if they didn't have a care in the world.
To them, everything was a game. Attacking someone, causing them to have fatal injuries, it was just something that they would do, and they didn't even seem to register how far they had gone.
Their brazen attack in a landmark tourist attraction means there are witnesses. To make the police's job even easier, the teens brag on social media.
One of their friends actually went to the police to tell them about what they had done.
Despite their pleas of innocence, the evidence against them is overwhelming. In January 2011, Rachel Burke, guilty of assault, sentenced to 2 years. Joel Alexander, who threw the punch, guilty of manslaughter, and sentenced to 6 years. Ringleader Ruby Thomas, guilty of manslaughter, and sentenced to 7 years. Her charge officially labeled a hate crime.
There is no other way to describe this but as a hate crime. These two men were attacked viciously because they were gay.
But homophobia isn't Ruby's real problem. Anger and alcohol are, just like her daddy.
Make no mistake about it, Ruby is a violent psychopath. Ian had no idea he was dealing with a ticking time bomb. This is really a cautionary tale. You never know what's going on in the head and the heart of a stranger on the corner. Be cautious.
On December 2nd, 1978, in a quiet community in Santa Barbara, something happens that strikes fear into every parent's heart. A missing child.
It was on a Saturday, which was typically a busy day for us at the market.
Yolanda Magana remembers the day well. As a 12-year-old in her family's grocery store.
My mom wanted to go shopping because Christmas was around the corner. My dad said, sure, you can go ahead and leave. I'll take over the register. You know, you taking the kids with you? And she said, sure, I'll take the kids with me.
Javier, is he going with you?
Oh, yeah. Go get your brother.
But when they are leaving, Yolanda can't find her 7-year-old brother, Javier.
We weren't sure if my dad didn't hear that we said he wasn't with us or if we just left.
Both parents think the little boy is with the other. He's not. He's left alone to play. When Yolanda and her mother return, they discover he's missing.
I remember going out to look for him. And I went to check with his playmate, and he had told me, you know, that he hadn't seen him ever since he had gone across the way into Julia's apartment.
Javier, ayúdeme con algo, por favor.
I'll be back in a minute.
Javier was last seen walking into the apartment of local babysitter, 22-year-old Julia Diaz. A new but trusted member of the community.
Being we were familiar with this apartment, I didn't hesitate to knock on the door and ask, you know, if my brother was there.
Hi, Julia. Have you seen Javier?
No.
Can I look around? He likes to hide.
Javier isn't there. But Yolanda recalls something strange about Julia's behavior.
She's just gotten out of the shower, and she's looking at me through the bathroom mirror. Her hair is up in a towel.
I can't find him anywhere. My mom is just so worried about him.
I tell him to go home if I see.
I turned around to walk away, and she walked up behind me and put her hand on me, saying, you know, well, wait a minute, don't leave.
Don't leave.
Yolanda is much closer to her brother than she thinks. Julia, a Mexican immigrant, has a troubled and violent past.
She, like many other immigrants that come to California, was trying to make money and send money home and support her family. She had a child who was left back in Mexico with her mother to raise, which is not terribly uncommon.
Making money is not easy. Her first job as a hotel chambermaid doesn't last.
What is taking you so long?
No English.
You're smoking. You... Don't you dare push me!
She's fired for a vicious temper.
You're fired.
And she had a physical altercation with a coworker, pulled some scissors out.
In Santa Barbara, she lands some work babysitting.
Hola, everything okay?
Yes. Okay.
Would you be able to babysit my children this afternoon?
The migrant community reaches out and welcomes her. But they have no idea who they are dealing with.
I'll only be a couple of hours. Okay?
Her young life was very spotty. She was in some trouble. She had some mental health issues. She was committed somewhere around the age of 14 or 15 years old.
No one suspects Julia is anything but a quiet neighbor, someone else to look out for the kids.
Next door to the market, there was a duplex, and she lived in the rear apartment of the duplex. We were the only kids in the neighborhood besides another family, so there was 4 of us that would run around together. And the neighbors always kept an eye on us.
When Julia watches the children, she's not looking out for them. She's plotting. 5 days before Javier goes missing, Julia is behind an unthinkable act.
This was a very cowardly and terrible act that she performed.
While babysitting a neighborhood girl, instead of caring for her, Julia brutally attacks the child.
She hit her with some kind of an object, something heavy, hit her pretty hard, whereby she was stunned and was bleeding. And then, after the attack,
What happened?
she ran out saying there's been an attack, called the police.
The little girl did not see who hit her.
In the following days, Julia pretends to find letters that threaten the girl's family.
What is it?
Julia Diaz, in her mind at the time, thought that she could extort money from the family since they were now in a state of terror around the attack.
They said something like, if you don't give me the money, worse things will happen.
Julia wants big money. The extortion notes ask for $10,000.
Pretty much all Julia has ever known is violence with other humans. Julia never learned to live peacefully with other people, picking fights and stealing. That's how she survived.
The family isn't rich and don't have anything close to $10,000. After 5 days without a payment, Julia decides to show she's serious. This time, 7-year-old Javier is in her sights.
I don't know exactly what she said to catch his attention and to have him go into the apartment, but it had to be something he was familiar with if he went so willingly.
Javier walks into a trap. Santa Barbara, 1978. 22-year-old babysitter Julia Diaz is trying to extort money from families by threatening their children. She attacks a girl 5 days earlier, but no one has paid up. Now she raises the stakes. Julia sets her sights on another family and lures 7-year-old Javier Angel into her home.
It is suspected that once the little boy was missing, she was going to follow up with another note saying, I told you I wanted money, you didn't give it to me, now your child is missing. Give me the money and I'll return him.
Javier is not going home.
She invited him in and then hit him over the head with a hammer.
After that, she strangled him with some form of rope or twine or something.
She put a garbage bag over him, tied it, and put another garbage bag over him. He wasn't dead when he was put in the bags.
Javier survives the blow and the strangling, but can't survive suffocation.
He would have died within a matter of a minute, maybe, without air, without oxygen. A child that young would just, he wouldn't have lasted very long.
Julia Diaz is a violent, evil person. Anyone that would do something against a child is not a good person.
Hi, Julia. Have you seen Javier?
When Javier's sister Yolanda comes looking for him that afternoon, she has no idea. She's talking to her brother's killer.
What possibly could my brother have ever done to have deserved something like that? Nobody deserves that.
Can't find him anywhere.
While the search for Javier is underway, the killer makes an eerie appearance at the family store.
Julia went into the market and asked her victim's parents if they could sell her something to wash the blood out of her clothes.
Hello?
I mean, she was like a psychopath. She had no feeling. Kill a child and ask her parents, you know, how do you get blood from the child off my pants? I mean, jeez.
Julia?
She was either being stupid or sadistic,
Do you have good cleaner
or maybe something in between.
or blood on clothes?
Whatever Julia is thinking, she has no time for her next move. Police already have her in their sights. Sadly, they are too late for Javier.
Well, the unfortunate thing about this case is she was suspected as the person who had sent the notes, and the police were going to arrest her in the early afternoon before the homicide. Unfortunately, they were called out on a stakeout. Had they not been on the stakeout, they would have taken her in earlier and this homicide wouldn't have occurred.
So, who wrote the letters?
Once in custody,
Didn't know who write it.
Julia inadvertently gives herself away.
Was it you, Julie?
No!
And you had nothing to do with Javier's death?
No, I did not hit that boy.
She said, I never hit that boy.
And how do you know the boy got hit?
Who said it?
Now, a person not knowing anything about what happened wouldn't say, you know, I didn't hit the boy.
I never said that.
It's like saying I didn't stab the person. How would you know he was stabbed?
Javier is soon found under Julia's bed, his little body still warm.
Feeling his warm body and knowing that he was likely still alive when he was stuffed in those bags. He had been found with pieces of her hair in his hands, which would suggest that he did try to ward her off, fight her off, and was defensive in the attack.
Yolanda remembers the day she learns the horrible truth.
As I walked down the main aisle of the market, I could hear my mom and dad, but I could hear them like wailing and crying. I looked at everyone and I said, you know, where's my brother at? And I go, it seems like, you know, he's been found. And no one would say anything.
In July 1979, Julia Diaz is convicted of first-degree murder. She is sentenced to life in prison. In 2011, Julia is denied parole for another 15 years.
I will do everything I can to keep her in prison until the day she dies. And I will make sure this gets taken care of until the day I die. How could someone that's a mother herself have done something to a little boy that was almost the same age as hers? No one's ever been able to figure her out.
Julia's intentions remain a mystery, but money seems to be her primary motive.
Maybe she felt she deserved better than she had in life, and maybe monetarily she could get that, but why take it out on two children?
The most important thing in Julia's life is Julia. She feels nothing for what she did to that little boy. I don't think any children were safe when Julia was around. End of story.
Some girls grow up fantasizing about looking and acting like someone else.
She was slim, she was beautiful, she was a dancer.
But what if it becomes a reality? In Melbourne, Australia, during the 1990s, 19-year-old Caroline Reed Robertson is suffering from low self-esteem. Although teenage angst isn't uncommon, for Caroline, it proves a huge burden.
She had been sad and lonely and miserable most of her life.
What are you looking at those for?
At times, she wishes she had never been born.
Why didn't you just abort me? Caroline? What is wrong with you?
It seems that she really hated herself, everything about herself.
She described herself as being ugly and fat and a misfit, and hated and lonely and no friends.
Deeply unhappy, Caroline fills diaries with self-loathing.
It's not unusual for teenage girls to doodle, to make lists about themselves, what they want in life. But they usually grow out of it by the time they're 14, 15. That didn't happen for Carolyn. She was making lists when she was 20. Everything with Carolyn went to the extreme.
But life takes a fresh turn when the Barber family moves in next door. 3 daughters, all with artistic pursuits. Caroline gets to babysit the talented children.
Just call me on this number if you need anything, okay?
Yeah, sure, thanks.
All right, I'll be back at 5, okay? Okay, all right. bye. Bye, Mom.
To an outsider like Caroline, this loving, creative, beautiful family was, to all intents and purposes, the perfect family.
Did you want to give it a go? Come on. All right.
Caroline takes a special interest in 13-year-old promising ballet dancer, Rachel.
She became, for some strange reason, obsessed with Rachel.
That's it. That's really good. So now you pop your left one just over there. Good.
Can you be my best friend?
Sure. Yeah. Okay, all right.
As if they were best friends, but they weren't. She was simply Rachel's babysitter.
We'll do it another time. All right.
In Caroline's eyes, Rachel is perfection.
What was that one where you balanced on one foot?
In 1997, Caroline asked to take some photographs of Rachel, allegedly for a school project that she was doing. It wasn't a school assignment. It was about Caroline feeding her obsession about Rachel. She was quite mesmerized by her and really had her up on a pedestal. Rachel could do nothing wrong and be nothing wrong.
In contrast, Caroline's old friends have always teased her.
I heard you wanted to be a singer or a dancer or something. What? Maybe you can sing for us. Yeah.
I can show you a dance move.
Yeah, do that.
About her desire to be a dancer, like Rachel.
She seemed to have been the object of amusement of her friends, so that when she would make a suggestion, I want to be an actress or a dancer or something, that would be met with laughter and derision, which made her even more unhappy and lonely.
Caroline wants to leave her old world and live in a new one. Rachel's world.
She was, in a nutshell, everything that Caroline wished that she was herself.
She certainly became fixated on Rachel, and at some point of time, interest became something more than that. Most of her waking hours were devoted to thinking about Rachel.
For 2 years, Caroline's fixation grows.
One thing that Caroline did was apply for Rachel's birth certificate, a thing that's usually done if you plan to assume someone's identity.
She doesn't just want to be like Rachel. Caroline plans to be Rachel.
She really wanted to morph into Rachel. She wanted a do-over.
Melbourne, Australia, 1999. 21-year-old Caroline Reed Robertson is obsessed with a young friend. 15-year-old Rachel Barber.
Caroline saw in Rachel things that she didn't have herself and wanted. Some would call that a fixation. I call it jealousy.
Caroline wants a new life. Rachel's. In her mind, taking it is the only way to achieve her goals.
It was an attempt to turn fantasy into reality.
Her plan is simple. As a trusted family friend, Caroline has no trouble coercing the teenager into a trap.
Rachel, it's Caroline. Hi, Caroline.
The ruse was going to be used that she had obtained some job for her which was going to pay her a fair bit of money, which for a young girl of 15 was very attractive.
The pay is really good. Really? Yeah, that sounds great.
Caroline asks her to keep it a secret from her parents.
Come to my place tomorrow night. Well, I'll come up to dance.
And invites Rachel to her apartment.
Okay, thanks.
To meet her new employer.
Thank you, bye.
I've got no doubt at all that Rachel had no idea what was coming.
On March 1st, the stage is set. At school, Rachel is excited.
Rachel was boasting to a couple of her friends at dance class.
You know those shoes I've been looking at? Yeah, the $100 ones. You can get them for How?
That she had scored some kind of opportunity to make a lot of money.
What kind of job? I can't talk about it, I'm sorry. Why not? Don't worry, I'll tell you later.
Rachel makes her way to what she thinks is a golden opportunity.
She was a sensible, grown-up 15-year-old. Her parents allowed her to travel on train. They trusted her to be responsible, to be sensible, and in turn, she was exactly that sort of person.
But Caroline's house is the most dangerous place Rachel can be.
Went back to the apartment. We know that Caroline bought some food, some pizza. A friend, a trusted person, an older person, inviting her to something fairly innocuous.
Caroline methodically follows her plan.
Caroline strangled Rachel with a cord, using her own hands. It takes approximately 4 minutes for a strong person to kill someone by strangulation. That's how long Caroline tightened the cord on Rachel's neck.
Caroline wants to be born again as the new Rachel. But it's a plan that was never going to work.
The most shocking part of the crime surrounds its utter futility. The notion that she could assume a new identity after carrying out such a murder is ludicrous.
There was no way that Caroline was ever going to look like Rachel.
By removing the life force from Rachel, Caroline can't keep it for herself. It's gone.
There's obviously some little glitch in Caroline's mind that just didn't think the logic of it through to its natural ending.
The only transformation is that Caroline is now a killer.
Caroline bundled her body into a wardrobe, still with the cable around her neck, and left her there for 2 days. At some time, Caroline wrapped Rachel's body in some blankets from her own flat, bundled them into a vehicle, and drove them to her father's property, where she buried Rachel in a shallow grave.
But her secret doesn't last very long. Caroline is the last person seen with Rachel and is top of the police's interview list. She is surprisingly frank.
Caroline admitted to what she had done and told police where she had buried the body.
Caroline Reed Robertson is convicted of murder on November 29th, 2000.
She received a sentence of 20 years in jail. The judge ordered that she serve a minimum of 14.5 years before being eligible to be considered for parole.
With time already spent in custody, Caroline is up for parole in late 2013. Some believe the murder was an act of insanity, but the court doesn't agree.
Well, the plea of guilty is an acknowledgement of not only the act of killing, but it's also that you possess the necessary mental element, that is an intention to kill.
For others, it was a simple human failing.
Some psychiatrists would look at this murder and say that Caroline was overwhelmed by a deep-seated need to shed her own skin and become someone else. I say she was motivated out of jealousy, pure and simple.
In prison, Caroline gets another life, but nothing like the one she so desperately admired. Rachel is gone forever, taken from her devastated family.
The whole event just seems so pointless and sad from everybody's perspective. Rachel is dead. Caroline's life has been ruined. One doesn't know what the future will hold for her when and if she comes out of jail. It's just an all-round tragedy.
These deadly women brutally stole lives for their own satisfaction. Ruby Thomas fostered a love of hate and killed a stranger. Julia Diaz stole an innocent life for greed. And Caroline Reed Robertson thought murder would make her a new person. Their hatred destroyed innocent lives because they were heartless souls. Sometimes the happiest day of a bride's life
Stay away from me!
is when the groom is dead. A Christian mom gives a helping hand for murder.
I want him dead.
She was offering $5,000 to $15,000.
I said I needed them.
A policeman's wife takes the law into her own hands.
Domestic violence frequently ends in death.
And a military bride does anything to escape divorce.
God help the next man who has a relationship with her.
These deadly women write their own wedding vows. They promise, from this day forward, to have and to kill. Memphis, Tennessee, 1985. Sundays are a day of worship for the Owens family. Morning and night, they go to church. 32-year-old Gail is in the choir.
She did appear to be the perfect mother. I mean, she sang in the church. She took care of 2 sons.
Her 37-year-old husband, Ron, is a respected member of the congregation.
Ron Owens was very active in church as well. He would stay after church on Sunday to coach basketball.
Their 2 sons love helping Dad.
Oh, that was beautiful, ladies. Congratulations. I'm just going to train and go right, the boys come.
Her and her husband had essentially the image of a perfect relationship.
Just make sure you're not late for dinner, right?
Gail looked like a devoted wife and mother. Took care of her family, involved with the church.
The Christian mom is often on missions in some of Memphis's poorest and toughest areas.
A suburban mother driving around some of the meanest streets of Memphis. She stuck out like a sore thumb.
It's predominantly black, and she's a white lady in a fancy car.
Gail is handing out cash to the poor.
She was offering thousands of dollars.
Here.
Her nickname in the neighborhood became Big Money.
But her generosity is causing her family to go broke.
Bills started coming back unpaid.
Gail wasn't paying the bills, she was hiding them. Debts were piling up.
Finished for the day?
Yes, I am.
Well, you have a lovely evening.
Ron has no idea what his wife's up to. It's not the first time she's kept a secret. For a number of years, Gail embezzled money from her employers. And not just the petty cash.
She embezzled somewhere around $60,000.
Gail's excuse for this was saying that it would ease financial pressure on her husband. In fact, it made financial pressure exist where it hadn't been there before.
Ron only finds out about his wife's thieving ways
What's going on, Gail?
It'll be all right, Ron.
when Gail's arrested. She's convicted of 35 counts of forgery.
Not only did she have to pay back the money, she was fined. Now the family was under financial strain.
Ron mortgages the house and uses their savings to pay Gail's debt to society.
Mommy!
After serving 60 days in jail, Gail comes home to a frosty welcome.
I'm going out.
Come on now, and I'll tell you all about it.
Okay.
There are questions about how much friction the embezzlement case and other debts had on their relationship.
Publicly, Ron stands by his wife. Privately, the hospital nursing administrator is mortified by Gail's crimes.
That ended up being a serious problem for the couple. He was angry, he was ashamed.
Close the door.
But Ron has a shameful secret of his own.
Lock it.
Ron had been having an affair with a woman at work.
Despite Outward's appearance of being a very happy couple, there were secrets. Her husband had been having an affair, we're told, with somebody at work.
The affair isn't as secret as Ron thinks. Gail is on to them. She follows her husband to work.
Gail realized that her husband was having an affair and confronted him about it.
Proud of yourself?
She actually caught him with his mistress in a parking lot.
How dare you?
How dare you?
Furious at his betrayal, Gail won't turn the other cheek.
She went to confront him, and she's alleged that he slapped her.
You monster!
They actually may have been headed to divorce because of this and other issues.
Gail fears divorce will cost her more than a husband. She'll lose her meal ticket. And because she's a jailbird, custody of her 2 sons.
I would say things were about as bad as they could get in the Owens household, but I'd be wrong. They were about to get a lot worse. She became desperate.
On the surface, Ron and Gail Owens appeared to have the perfect relationship. Living in the middle-class city of Bartlett, Memphis. Until tragedy. Ron is the victim of a brutal home invasion.
Robbery seemed like it was a plausible motive in that he didn't seem to have any enemies at the time. He was well-liked in the community and active, so there's no reason to think that anybody would have wanted him to be murdered.
The attack stuns the community. Violent crime is rare here.
When this murder happened, it was the second murder that they know of being recorded.
Nothing is stolen, and Ron has no known enemies. It's a baffling case. Until police get a call from the other side of town.
A few days later, when a man named George James came forward and said that Gail Owens had offered him money to kill her husband.
George tells them a crazy tale of a white woman armed with cash, trolling the mean streets of Memphis, looking for a hitman.
She drove around for months, in fact, approaching groups of young men.
Gail thinks the right cash can turn any stranger
I want him dead.
into a killer.
How much?
5,000.
I'm gonna need some money. I'm gonna need some money up front.
There were several men who ostensibly took her up on the offer, but essentially scammed her. She was offering thousands of dollars, and there were people who said sure, and then she never heard from them again.
She was a laughingstock. They took her money, though.
Gail is conned out of thousands of dollars, but she doesn't give up.
She ran out of money, but that didn't deter her. She was bound and determined to find someone to kill her husband, and eventually she did.
This is the house.
42-year-old Sydney Porterfield is willing to murder now and be paid later.
When do I get paid?
When his life insurance comes through.
How much?
He had quite a background in criminal history and assaults and other things.
Ron's death will make Gail a wealthy widow.
Gail Owens stood to gain $115,000 from Ron Owens' life insurance policy.
It's nice dribbling, Brian. Come on, Steve, take defense. Go, shoot, go. Oh, nice. Go, boys.
February 17th, 1985. Like every other Sunday, the Owens family go to church.
Mom, how do we go basketball practice with Dad?
No, not tonight.
Oh, please.
Why not?
But after the service, Gail changes their routine.
Come on, Gail.
The two boys always liked to watch Ron play basketball. And that particular night, she wouldn't let them watch and made them go with her to her sister's house.
Tonight, she wants Ron home alone to greet her paid guest.
So that night, Ron parked his car in his driveway, walked into the house, is attacked from behind by Sidney Porterfield.
Ron is ambushed with a tire iron.
There was probably 26 plus blows to the back of his head. It was hit so hard it appeared that you would have taken a small hand axe and hit somebody in the back of the head. That's how split open it was.
Incredibly, Ron clings to life.
Dad?
When Gail and her two sons return home later that night, she lets the 11-year-old lead the way.
She had her son go into the house. Of course, he found his dad in the floor, and that's when the police were called.
Ron actually lingered for a few hours before actually dying at the hospital.
I'm not sure which is worse, having her husband killed or allowing one of her children to find his father's body.
After months of planning, Gail is finally a wealthy widow. But her celebrations are short-lived.
I want him dead.
One of her would-be hitmen is telling all.
When he told us that she had tried to hire him, we had him call her, and he told her that she didn't give him some money. He was going to the Bartlett police.
George plays the lead in a sting.
Look, you don't need to know anything else.
When Gail gives him money for his silence, every word is caught on tape.
Why'd you kill your husband?
Look, we just had a bad 13 years, okay?
The game's up, and she knows it.
Well, she confessed to paying to have him murdered. There was no emotion during her statement, from what I understand.
This is none of your business.
Gail claims the day Ron slapped her sealed his fate.
You monster!
She said that that incident is what led her to take to the streets of Memphis and look for someone to kill her husband.
Gail gives up Sidney Porterfield. He's convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. In 1986, Gail Owens is convicted of accessory to first-degree murder. She, too, is sentenced to death.
Gail underestimated everyone.
How much?
5,000.
I think she really believed that anyone in the black community would be happy to take her money and kill and keep their mouth shut, and she was completely wrong.
After 26 years on death row, Gail's sentence is commuted to life. In 2011, she is granted parole. To the surprise of many, waiting outside the prison is her son.
At some point, Stephen decided that he couldn't hold on to this anger anymore and that he needed to forgive her. To this day, they're nearly inseparable.
I don't think society needs to be very nervous about Gail Owens living among them. Most people serving time in prison for murder had one specific person they wanted to kill, and they did it for what they believed was one important reason. Gail falls into that category.
Who is she? I want to know who she is.
And there's nobody.
Yes, there is. Now you tell me who she is.
Every home has secrets.
People around them started seeing these cracks.
$500 on clothes.
Some about everyday life.
They argued a lot about Kim's spending.
Others are unthinkable.
Stay away from me.
I wished he'd left and taken the kids at that point.
Calexico takes its name from its location, the border of California and Mexico.
It's a rural area, extremely impoverished. The population is predominantly Hispanic.
In 2006, new residents come to town, the Cano family. 37-year-old Kim convinces her husband Frank to leave Los Angeles for the desert life. They move to the upscale side of town.
They purchased a 5-bedroom home in a brand new subdivision.
The couple is raising 4 children. They're 3, and Kim's teenage daughter from her first marriage.
Frank basically was just best husband. He would just go to work, come home, dedicated his time to his kids and his wife.
But people around them started seeing these cracks.
I've got chores for you.
Yes, boss. Everybody had to do what she said, and they better hop to it.
Frank lets her run the house. But one thing he won't give up is the job he loves as a California Highway Patrol officer, even though that means a 400-mile round trip to and from work.
Kim insisted that they move 3 hours away from where Frank worked. I don't know what she was thinking.
It's a sacrifice Frank makes to keep Kim happy.
It made it really rough on Frank. Now he had to work a night shift and swing shift, and it really messed up his sleeping habits.
Frank gave her everything within his power to give. A home, beautiful children, amenities, love, affection.
Is that perfume?
Kim, don't start.
But Kim suspects his true affection lies elsewhere.
She suspected Francisco was possibly having an extramarital affair in Los Angeles.
Frank denies cheating, but admits he has a close female friend at work.
She accused Frank of having an affair. He said, no, she's just a friend. And that Frank was a very friendly guy. But from that point on, Kim was very suspicious about him.
There is another problem in the home. Kim's spending.
What's this? $500 on clothes, $200 on a purse.
I needed that.
Frank had a pretty good salary insofar as being a trooper. It was never enough for Kim. But I think if Frank had made $1 million a minute, it wouldn't have been enough for Kim.
This has got to stop.
During the course of those arguments, their children actually saw her physically lash out against him.
Frank keeps the abuse a secret.
I wanted to confide in you.
Kim doesn't.
been beating. Not Frank.
Kim said that Frank was verbally and physically abusing her.
Kim, what's wrong?
Stay away from me!
Everyone that knew Frank described him as a great guy. Kim described him as an alcoholic and abusive. I think Kim saw every man that way.
Calexico, Southern California.
I've just driven over 200 miles.
Highway Patrol Officer Frank Cano is always exhausted from long shifts, miles of travel, and arguments at home. Now his wife Kim is out to smear him.
I need you to come over.
She calls his work supervisor.
Frank was painting the bedroom. She said he was doing a sloppy job. She said, you know, Frank's been drinking, he's been yelling at me, he's made a mess here.
I don't know what Kim was thinking, because if a law enforcement officer is convicted of domestic abuse, they cannot carry a gun. If they cannot carry a gun, they cannot be a law enforcement officer. I don't know what Kim thought was going to happen to that paycheck.
See? He's a mess.
Hey, buddy.
You here to help?
When Kim left, the supervisor said, Frank, maybe you better get marriage counseling.
They never get a chance to visit a counselor.
Oh, please hurry! I didn't know the guy was on, I didn't know.
Just days later, on December 4th, 2006.
He's gone.
No!
Frank is dead, the victim of a terrible accident.
No!
Kim says it should be her lying dead. She was about to end her own life when Frank tried to stop her.
Now, Kim says she's so fed up, she's had it. She's gonna get that gun and commit suicide. Frank comes into the room.
Stay away from me!
Kim says she's frightened. She says he's angry. She aims the gun up at the ceiling, she says, closes her eyes and takes a shot. It hits Frank in the eye and kills him.
Detective Julio Diaz starts investigating Kim's story and finds the couple has been constantly fighting, or at least one of them has.
Kim could fly off the handle at times. She had kind of a short fuse.
Stay away from me!
At family get-togethers, Kim would launch into uncontrollable attacks against Francisco.
Stay away from me!
She threatened to stab him with a kitchen knife in the middle of an argument in front of their older daughter.
I want to know who she is.
There's nobody.
Yes, there is. Now you tell me who she is.
Their children tell a tale of spousal abuse by Kim.
Well, why don't I just shoot you then?
Well, go ahead and do it. See what happens.
She remembers Kim telling Frank, well, how about if I just shoot you? And he said, well, go ahead and do it and see what happens.
Mom. Dad.
Detective Diaz starts to realize the Canos' lives aren't exactly how Kim portrays them. And then there's her story of the shooting.
Stay away from me!
She was just trying to scare him, so she shot him in the air.
Forensic ballistics reveal the shot that kills Frank is carefully aimed at one place.
Her gun was at basically her face level. And I mean, it was pointing right at his face. There's no way that it was pointing at the ceiling because it wouldn't have hit his face.
Kim Kano goes to trial for murder, and prosecutors make their case. The day Frank is killed, he's writing a love letter to his wife.
Frank! Frank!
She called out to him.
I need you up here.
He abruptly got up from the kitchen table and went upstairs to see what the problem was.
The problem is an angry wife with a loaded gun.
What's wrong?
Frank must have been astonished to see his own gun pointed at him like that. It must have been just horrifying.
Kim claims the gun goes off by accident.
She said it felt like a piece of paper when she pulled the trigger, but a ballistics expert testified that it actually took 12 pounds of force to pull the trigger.
Did your father yell at your mom?
Adding to the weight of evidence, her children testify against her.
Did you see anyone get hit?
Yes, sir. Mom hit Dad.
They'd lost their father. They knew if they testified against their mother and she was found guilty, she'd be going to prison. They'd be losing her, too.
Yes, sir. Mom hit Dad.
They must have believed she belonged in prison. They also might have been very afraid of her. If she can kill Dad, she can kill me.
In 2010, Kim Kano is found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 40 years to life.
Kim never confessed she had to be in the right. She could not admit that she'd done wrong.
Everyone loved Frank Kano, except his wife. But why did she kill him?
Greed. She was the beneficiary of a life insurance policy that paid the balance of their debt in the event of his accidental death. And frustration, because he wasn't able to provide her with the lifestyle that she felt he should be able to provide her with.
Kim's narcissistic ways steal a good father from his children.
Frankie said, you know, I would never be able to see another football game with my father again. That really bothered me. That really hurt.
I think Frank felt that being a cop was enough to keep her from seriously hurting him. Sadly, he was wrong.
In the silence of darkness,
Around 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, Taishi got up.
a young woman's life changes forever.
She was in the bathroom.
She didn't see or hear anybody. She just heard a gunshot.
A tragic mystery to a life that started with such promise.
It's just abhorrent.
Fort Hood, Texas, one of the biggest military bases in the U.S. Its support town, Killeen, teams with young soldiers from all over the country, including 20-year-old Gary Prokop.
Gary was born in Germany and grew up in San Diego, California. He joined the military after he finished high school, and he had never been to Killeen, Texas until he was stationed there at Fort Hood.
Here in 1996, opposites attract. carefree local party girl, 17-year-old Taishi Grant, catches the soldier's eye.
Honey.
You want to marry him?
She didn't really have a whole lot of ambition, but Taishi was a lot of fun to be around.
Gary came from a good family, graduated high school, and he didn't do drugs. The exact opposite of Taishi and her friends.
What's your name?
Taishi.
But Gary can't resist Taishi's charms.
Gary was new in the area. He didn't know anyone. He was probably a bit lonely being away from his family.
Romance blossoms, and in a whirlwind, there are wedding bells.
It's not unusual in Killeen to go ahead and make it official and be married, and then they can get the benefits from the military.
You know what I like waking up to?
I'm surprised now.
Military accommodation, medical insurance, a comfortable life. By marrying Gary, Taishi's fortunes instantly change.
She must have seen Gary as someone who could give her something that she didn't have.
And nothing cements a new marriage like a baby.
What's it mean?
You're gonna be daddy.
At first, the relationship seemed to be going well. Gary might have thought there were no problems initially, but it was a little different for Taishi.
Taishi hasn't really thought this through. Life as a stay-at-home military mom
Taishi?
is not Taishi's idea of a good time.
How can you live like this?
You don't like it? It's me.
She's just the kind of person that didn't care to be a responsible mom. Old food, laying around, dirty carpet, clothes everywhere. It's just the kind of house that most people would not want to live in.
And you're going out?
Oh, and she needs a diaper changed.
To Taishi, Gary looked good. He offered a life she wanted, but not really.
She wanted to do what she wanted to do. Taishi liked to party.
She didn't really want to leave her friends and her druggy lifestyle behind.
Taishi leaves Gary holding the baby, while she plays around with an old high school sweetheart, 18-year-old Jacob Harris.
That was what she really wanted.
She was more committed to hanging out with her gang friends and her drug friends. Jacob Harris was one of them, her boyfriend. And that's what led to the animosity between her and Gary.
Just a year into the marriage, Gary has had enough.
Want to be a college boy?
Taishi and her husband decided to divorce.
Gary plans to move back home to California.
Maybe it's best if you don't come back.
Damn right.
I think to Taishi, Gary represented a meal ticket. There's really no indication she ever even loved him.
Gary's not only leaving Taishi, he's leaving the Army and losing all the benefits of being a soldier.
You divorce him, you won't get nothing.
When he left the Army, his health benefits would end. In addition to that, he would no longer have the $200,000 life insurance policy. And Taishi decided, well, it's time to get something from him before he goes.
I'd be better off an Army widow, wouldn't I?
When Taishi figured this all out, I think she set a date for his murder.
Killeen, Texas, 1998. 18 months after their wedding, 22-year-old husband Gary and his 19-year-old wife, Taishi Prokop, plan their divorce.
So she can stay with me at Easter?
Yep, if I have her for Christmas.
Yeah, sounds fair.
And the future of their baby daughter.
They had sat down and written a custody agreement, and it appeared that Gary had every intention of being a good father. He wanted custody on certain holidays, and this agreement laid out exactly when he would get her and when Taishi would get her, what financial arrangements they would have, and what Gary would pay for.
There's only one arrangement Taishi doesn't like.
Gary was planning on leaving the service. That would have meant an end to his regular Army paycheck, as well as that $200,000 life insurance policy.
She isn't interested in being a divorcee. Taishi wants to be a widow.
She wanted that money. She saw that as an opportunity for her to do other things.
All right, so coming through here, this is the lounge room.
With her lover, 20-year-old Jacob Harris, and 2 willing friends, Taishi plans Gary's demise.
What shocks me is how easy it was for her boyfriend Jacob to find people to help him do it. It's just abhorrent.
20-year-old Charles Chucky Turnbull will be the gunman. 19-year-old Rodney Barfield, the getaway driver.
And I'll be out of town.
Jacob gives himself the perfect alibi.
He left and went to Missouri. You know, how can I be involved in the crime? I'm in Missouri, I'm out of state.
In the early hours of June 25th, 1998, Taishi seals Gary's fate.
Around 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, Taishi got up, went to the front door and unlocked it. Chucky came into the house.
Taishi retreats to the bathroom, leaving her sleeping husband an easy target.
Chucky fired an assault rifle 1 time right into Gary's head and ended his life just like that.
The murder of Gary Prokop was mercifully quick and painless. He was shot in the head while he was sleeping and never knew what happened.
To complete the plan, Taishi needs to play a shocked bystander.
The story that she relayed was that she was in the bathroom. She didn't see or hear anybody. She just heard a gunshot. She was scared and she fled the house.
Help! Help!
She just ran straight to her neighbors and called 911.
Send the police! Someone shot my husband!
But Taishi is a bad actor.
Someone shot my husband! Send help!
She was a suspect right away.
Someone shot my husband! Send help!
It sounded in the 911 call as though she was trying to force herself to cry or to sound like she was crying, but officers on the scene said that she wasn't crying at all, that they never saw tears.
There's another red flag for investigators.
She forgot to bring her baby with her. What kind of mother would leave their baby in danger? Taishi did, because she knew her baby was not in danger.
But despite their suspicions, the police lack direct evidence, and for 3 years, Taishi gets away with murder.
Everybody thought that her story probably was not legitimate, but they had nothing to go on.
Then Sergeant Patrick Turk gets a break in the case, thanks to a police informant.
One of my sources came to me at one point and said that he had information about this Prokop murder that had occurred in 1998, and he wanted to talk to me about it.
The informant leads police to the getaway driver, Rodney Barfield.
It was Tasha's idea. Chucky was the shooter.
Filled with remorse, he cracks.
I was the driver.
Over the course of about 5 hours, he confessed his full involvement in the crime. He cried as he confessed.
You got the gun?
Yeah.
He detailed all the roles of all the individual players in the crime.
The more co-conspirators you have in any plan, eventually someone's gonna crack.
Their house of cards collapses. Facing the death penalty, Taishi accepts a plea.
The evidence was pretty compelling, but she never admitted her involvement in the crime, other than to accept a guilty plea.
All the co-defendants are convicted. Charles Turnbull of capital murder. Jacob Harris and Rodney Barfield of conspiracy to commit capital murder.
He obviously had remorse about the crime, and yet he got sucked up into helping out with it, and he's going to be spending most of his life in prison.
In 2003, Taishi Prokop pleads guilty to capital murder and is sentenced to life in prison. She is eligible for parole in 2032.
Taishi is exactly where she belongs, and I hope she stays there for the rest of her life.
A young man's bright future is cut short.
Just the senseless death of a soldier, unrelated to combat. He was a good dad. He was a good soldier. He was loved by his family.
What's your name?
Because he married the wrong woman.
Taishi had little education and no career at the time she killed her husband. But a lot of women fall into that category, and they don't get featured on Deadly Women.
These deadly women betrayed the most intimate trust. Gail Owens contracted out her husband's murder. Kim Kano took the law into her own hands. And Taishi Prokop's greed cost a young soldier his life. All three women killed those they vowed to love. For these brides, wedded bliss was to have and to kill.